how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News, we're starting the conversation and having the debate that the establishment won't have.
No one will be cancelled.
Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Schools face mass disruption as tens of thousands of teachers stage fresh walkouts.
Good morning at 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 27th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Thank you very much indeed for your company. Leading our news this morning. Schools in England face closures today as teachers hold mass strikes. All major education unions have rejected the government's offer of a 4.3% pay rise, with the NEU branding it insulting.
This morning, the Health Secretary will bring a legal challenge against a proposed 48-hour nurses' strike that starts on Sunday. The leader of the Royal College of Nursing has accused Steve Barclay of treating healthcare workers like criminals.
The illegal migration bill has passed through the House of Commons despite criticism from some Conservative MPs. The bill is expected to run into more opposition when it faces the House of Lords, where it could be heavily amended.
Evacuation flights from Sudan could continue after the end of the ceasefire tonight, according to the army officer in charge of the operation. So far, 500 British nationals have been rescued from the conflict zone.
And a diplomatic storm is brewing after it was revealed that the architect of China's crackdown on Hong Kong will attend the King's coronation. Politicians have reacted with fury, calling his attendance an insult.
So make sure you keep your thoughts coming our way throughout the course of the morning. We'd love to hear from you. Send them via Twitter or via email. It's gbviews@gbnews.uk. And don't forget, we want to know where you're watching us.
You know what my thoughts are?
What?
Why is my tie
squiffy
over and I can't get it straight? Why is it not?
The other way. That'd be the old camera left, camera right.
We're looking at a monitor which has everything in reverse. Is that okay? No, it's not. I've just done it again.
Let me sort you out.
Yeah. Right, okay.
Oh, no, that's tricky. That's going to take some time.
That'll take some time. Keep me posted, folks, to what side it's leaning throughout the programme. So our top story this morning, tens of thousands of teachers in England are going to walk out today after members of the National Education Union, the NEU, rejected the government's pay offer. They've called it insulting.
All major teaching unions have now rejected the 4.3% wage rise, warning the disruption will get worse unless a deal's reached.
Now, this follows the closure of most schools in Northern Ireland yesterday, but in Scotland, teachers have suspended strike action, with the union urging its members to accept their government's offer of a 12% pay increase.
Well, joining us this morning is the political reporter at the Daily Express, Millie Cook. Good morning to you, Millie.
Good morning.
Look, the timing of this is particularly poignant, I think, in terms of the pupils, because we're heading into exam season. A number of A-levels have had to be rescheduled today, and front and centre of all of this, of course, is the welfare of the kids. I mean, you might have an industrial right to strike, but children are being kept at home again.
No, absolutely, and it is. We are likely to see huge amounts of disruption across the UK today for both pupils and parents. And heading into exam season, it's really not good for pupils, and I can't even imagine the anxiety they must be facing leading up to really important exams. But it has to be said that, speaking to a lot of teachers this week, they do have the pupils' best interests at heart, and they really just want to provide services for pupils. But obviously, if you're a student, it must be hard to see that your education is at risk when you're facing such important exams.
So how does this all get solved? Because we know that the unions have been urging the Education Secretary to come back and negotiate, and she's refused unless they call off the strikes, which they are also refusing. So we're in this kind of situation where it's a standoff. And now it's got to the point where the government's actually rescinded the bonus that it was offering.
Yeah, so currently teachers are demanding an above-inflation rise. So with inflation at 10% at the moment, it is a steep order. But their main...
Did it in Scotland?
It's true, but their main concern is currently they want a funded pay rise. So teachers kind of across the UK are really demanding a pay rise that doesn't just come out of students' budgets. So they're kind of... That's when I say that they've got the students' best interests at heart, because they're really concerned about students losing out on funding and making both the lives of students and teachers harder if they take it straight out of the education budget. So they're kind of looking for a clean 10% that comes from elsewhere.
You know, is it just me? But, you know, folks, as you wake up today, do you think, has the world ever been worse? I mean, outside world wars and whatever, but everything seems to be falling apart. Everybody is malcontent about everything. And when this infiltrates into schools, you know, when you're at your most impressionable or whatever, it just doesn't augur well for the rest of society, does it?
No, absolutely doesn't. I think at the moment the government is facing a number of headaches. So obviously overnight we've seen things like the migration bill break, we've seen school strikes, nursing strikes. It just feels like there is discontent across so many issues that are important to Rishi Sunak's agenda.
Well, can we talk about the nursing strike? Important to point out, I think, midwives have accepted an NHS pay offer in the last 24 hours. But meanwhile, the Health Secretary is taking the nurses to court because he's saying they've been left with no choice. It's a technicality, but he feels he has to put his foot down. What's the latest on that?
But he loves acting the hard man bit. He loves flexing his muscles and I'll tell you who's in charge. He's not in charge, really. At the end of the day, I believe the unions will win. At the end of the day, they will get some sort of, not compromise, more than a compromise, some sort of demand that they want. So why are we just messing about? Let's just settle.
I mean, at the moment, it really does sum up exactly how far negotiations and relations between the government and the unions have deteriorated. Because currently, Steve Barclay is taking them to court over a technicality. So he's arguing that their mandate for strikes has expired, because I think they balloted members that expired. They balloted, the ballot closed at midday in November on, I think it was November 2nd. Yeah. And now he's saying their strike action needs to end at midday or kind of the night before on May 2nd. And he's fighting them over kind of a 24-hour window, which isn't based on kind of looking at whether or not strike action overall is legal. It's very much a timing issue, which feels kind of like a nitty-gritty back and forth.
It's point scoring, isn't it? But it speaks, I suppose, to the frustration, because they had a deal with the nurses, and in fact Pat Cullen and other members of nursing unions recommended it to their members, and it was the members that rejected it. So they had all this progress. They were quoting the deal with the RCN to all the other unions, saying, look what progress we've done here, and it's all fallen apart. So you can see that he's incredibly frustrated. At the same time, front of The Guardian this morning, now criticisms that Steve Barclay is bullying members of the civil service.
It really is a headache for the government this week. It's just not looking good for... I mean, across several departments, they're really struggling, but I feel like these reports, especially for Steve Barclay, it's especially difficult in the wake of the Tolley report into Dominic Raab. So the fact that one minister has already resigned just in the last week, it really isn't looking good, and it really shows that there is tensions kind of across departments, whether it's between unions and the government or civil servants and their ministers. But it really is a stressful time, I think.
Although it is interesting, I mean, there were always rumours about Dominic Raab, but I've never heard anything. Well, you say he likes to sort of flex his muscles, Eamonn, Steve Barclay, but no.
Oh, Steve Barclay, yes.
I'm just saying it's come a little bit out.
Well, I do think Steve
blue.
Barclay's got a persona of, don't mess with me type attitude.
Maybe. Well, yeah, I mean, look, there'll obviously have to be investigations into that and exactly what these informal complaints are. But it seems very easy to make that accusation now, that the bullying accusation. It's very sort of...
I think you can make bullying accusations against anyone, really. If you look at someone the wrong way, it's bullying as well. So I think it's going to be around, and it's going to be very much a thing between the civil service and government ministers from here on in. Millie, thanks for the moment anyway. Thank you very much. Good talking to you. Thanks for that sum up there. We go to Sudan now, and evacuation flights could continue after the end of the ceasefire tonight, according to the army officer in charge of the operation.
That being said, the Foreign Secretary has warned that the government cannot guarantee how many flights will depart after the deadline is reached.
Well, so far, 6 carrying over 500 British nationals have been rescued from the conflict zone. Let's get more from former Army Officer Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford. Stuart, good morning. Very good to see you. I think the problem with this situation is if they can't guarantee the safety of the airport and the airport perimeter, it would be a brave person who would authorise one of those massive troop carrier planes to fly in and fly out and promise that it will be safe.
Yes, good morning. I mean, I think you're absolutely right there. It's we shouldn't underestimate how chaotic the situation tends to be in circumstances such as this. Clearly, normal civilian operations have broken down in the country because of the conflict between the two opposing sides. And when the military is called in, their first task is to actually impose some sort of order on the chaos that faces them. And the main airport is dangerous, so that's why we're flying our people out from an airstrip about an hour away from the centre of Khartoum. It has got a cordon in place, as far as I'm aware. And the Royal Air Force and the other people from the Army and from the Royal Navy are processing people as quickly as they can. But people are turning up sort of on an ad hoc basis when they can get there. It's not as if they are being brought out in sort of ordered groups. So yes, I mean, it's chaos, but that's what our people are actually quite good at doing, is bringing order to chaos.
Although there has been one, I think, special services injury, hasn't there? One of the French during the operations over the weekend, and as it just sort of speaks to the volatility of it all. And yesterday in Khartoum, one of the prisons there, and I think a number of prisons across the country have now been opened, and even a criminal wanted by the International Criminal Court and extreme Islamists have been released onto the streets, which just adds to, as you described, this sort of really dangerous situation on the ground.
Yes, indeed. I mean, absolutely. It's dangerous, and I think obviously someone who knows what they're doing has taken the decision that UK nationals, or those who are eligible to be extracted by the United Kingdom, should make their own way across Khartoum to the airstrip rather than bringing them out in ordered groups. And as you said, other nations have taken different decisions, and the French convoy was fired upon. And I think someone has obviously taken the decision that individual families in individual cars is a less dangerous mode of transport than convoys, which can be much more threatening. But, we're not there, and the decisions have to be taken on the ground, and the people that we've got there will be well briefed and well trained in what they're meant to be doing. But it won't be perfect.
Yeah, but Lieutenant Colonel, probably a bit more perfect than it was in Afghanistan and Kabul.
Yes, indeed. Well, I mean, that really was precipitated by the US's decision to basically pull out precipitously, and we had to react to that. This isn't quite the same because we've got the ceasefire 72 hours, probably going to be extended for another 24 hours with a bit of luck. And so we're not talking about the same levels of chaos. Interestingly, as far as I'm aware, the United States has got about 20,000 of its nationals in Sudan, civilian nationals, and they haven't yet started to extract them. So the UK is far from being the last.
Gosh, that's a significant number.
Yeah.
Far more significant than British. We think there's around 4,000, although I think at last count, the British Foreign Office saying only 2,000 people have been in touch with the British consular asking for evacuation from the country. Presumably, that's a higher number if you factor in people who are there perhaps on holiday, and very difficult to track those people down. And I think we will hear, even after this US-Saudi ceasefire ends this evening, we will hear of people over the coming weeks still trying to get out of the country, and it's only going to get more hairy, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the UK or the Foreign Office will have an absolutely exact number of UK nationals who are there, because we don't live in a Big Brother society, notwithstanding all the CCTV, etc., etc. And some people will be in the Sudan and haven't notified any of the authorities that they're there, nor do they need to. So, and nor will they turn up in exact plane load numbers. So the flights have to go when the flights have to go, whether they're full or not. We haven't yet got to the point where we have to send in armed soldiers to extract people from the dangerous areas. That may come, but that's a big decision that people on the ground will have to take.
Thanks for your insight, Colonel. Thank you very much indeed. Former Army Officer Stuart Crawford there. Thank you very much indeed. The man behind China's crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong will fly to London next week to attend the King's Coronation, which hasn't gone down well with some people.
Yeah, including MPs. All of this comes as the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, used a speech to outline his new approach to China, calling for a constructive and robust relationship.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, with this report.
Is China a threat to Britain? A question that seems to have in recent days sent the government squirming. The emerging superpower has in recent months begun to accelerate its military build-up, with potentially grave consequences for Taiwan and global trade through the South China Sea. The Chinese Communist Party has also been ruthlessly oppressing its own people, particularly the Uyghurs, who have faced what many human rights organisations are describing as crimes against humanity, or genocide. Yet this week, the government is refusing to use the word threat.
Some people want me to define our relationship with China in one word. I'm not going to do that.
Indeed, the government doesn't use one word, instead it uses two. Instead of threat, we're told China is a, quote, systemic challenge.
With regard to China, it's increasingly clear that China is a country that does have different values to ours. It poses a systemic challenge, and its behaviour is concerning. More authoritarian at home, more assertive overseas, and in light of that, it's right that we take the steps that are necessary to protect ourselves and to stand up for our values.
This is despite the Prime Minister having campaigned last year describing the emerging superpower as, quote, the largest threat to Britain. The former director of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, Luke de Pulford, believes that the government is rowing back on Rishi Sunak's word.
I think the government's position on China is increasingly confusing. We heard from Rishi Sunak when he was on the campaign trail to become Prime Minister that China was our #1 threat. More than that, that he would recognise it on day one of his premiership. He didn't do that. In fact, what we're hearing now from the Foreign Secretary and from the Prime Minister is something very different. We hear about robust pragmatism, whatever that means. That's how we need to engage with China, instead of it being our #1 threat.
Pragmatism here is certainly a shift in rhetoric, and is clearly what defines the government's new approach. To many, pragmatism is the only way to deal with China, given how large a role it plays in the global economy, or with issues like climate change. Rana Mitter is Professor of Politics of Modern China at Oxford University.
There are a whole variety of areas where the UK will have different sorts of conversations and sometimes oppositions to China. When it comes to human rights, clearly China and the UK take very different positions on individual liberties. But when it comes to climate change, it's clear that the agenda of trying to switch to green energy is something that China, the United States, the UK, the EU, all major global economies are going to deal with. And balancing those issues is really where the next generation of UK-China policy is going to have to make choices.
The UK's Asia-Pacific tilt leads to questions of values, trade, and global cooperation when it comes to China. As things stand, the government stands accused of trying to have it both ways. Tom Harwood, GB News.
And there's so many questions about who's been invited and who hasn't been invited and whatever. And one of the most prominent people invited is, well, she would be First Minister if there was a government sitting, Sinn Féin leader Michelle O'Neill in Northern Ireland, whose father was a member of the IRA and whose cousin was a member of the IRA as well. And she's an avowed Republican. And I just think it's an amazing thing that she has accepted the invitation and is going, because notoriously, of course, Sinn Féin don't take up their seats in Parliament.
You're more interested in the fact that she's even accepted the invitation rather than that she was given an invitation, because I suppose it's protocol. Even Xi Jinping of China, as a head of state's been invited, and as you say, it's recognition of the office that she would hold if Stormont was sitting. So she has to be invited.
So much has happened with the peace process in Northern Ireland that you get Republicans giving respect to the English monarchy. You know, you've had her predecessor there, Martin McGuinness, shaking hands with the Queen and whatever. Remember the IRA murdered Lord Mountbatten.
Yeah, in Northern Ireland, wasn't it? Yeah.
No, it was in the Republic of Ireland. But it was just amazing, the very fact that there would be this recognition on both sides to do all of this. But then, of course, there are all the people who haven't been invited, like the Queen's bridesmaids and various people like that.
And like you. But like Sarah Ferguson.
Sarah Ferguson's a very good example, you know, of that.
It can't be easy having to draw up that guest list.
No.
Genuinely can't be easy.
No.
I wouldn't want that job.
You know, if you've ever done it for a party or a wedding and you have the guest list and, you see, I have this thing with my kids and I think, well, you would have a table or whatever where daddy and mummy's friends are invited. And I get this whole thing, well, they're not our friends. Why are they there for? You know, it's like
people you have to invite rather than people you want.
Well, if I'm paying for it,
well, that was my husband's view of our wedding. He didn't want, you know, it to become a work event. He just wanted people who loved us as a couple. Which is why you were one of a very select few.
I was there. That's right, I was there.
Work.
That was a good day, Isabel.
No, thank you.
It was a good day. Your daddy's speech was...
Oh, stop going on about it.
Can I tell people what it was about?
Can you do the succinct version, if you must?
No.
It referred to my conception. That's all you need to know.
That's all you need was...
And it was not authorised by any of the family.
Making me blush now.
And my mum edited it from the wedding video for all eternity.
Well, the time is approaching 6:20. It's exactly 6:29. 3, 2, 1 second. There we go. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
More than 400 workers from His Majesty's Revenue and Customs will take industrial action in May and June. PCS members will strike for 18 days over the 2 months amid a dispute over pay, pensions, jobs and redundancy. The union says the government's until later today to make a fair offer to stop the strikes.
Labour claims the government is abandoning first-time buyers. This comes as an English housing survey shows that only a third of children born this year in England will own a home by the time they reach their 50s. Labour says they would get more homes built and actively support first-time buyers.
A waxwork of the Queen Consort has been unveiled at Madame Tussauds in London ahead of the coronation. The figure is styled in a dark blue gown next to King Charles in the throne room. The museum says this is their mark of a new chapter.
That's very good.
It's absolutely
I think that's
brilliant.
very good. I think it's much better than the Charles one.
I think the Charles one's pretty good.
Yeah. But great. Is that you there in the white top?
Is that me? No.
Looked like you.
Did not.
It would just look waxy looking, you know.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Anyway, very, very nice. Very nice.
Just looking at that picture of the waxwork of Camilla on the front of the Times, and something else caught my eye. Really unusual story on the front of the Times for them to be picking up on, well, it's a church story. Apparently there's been a report published by the Archbishops of Canterbury and York trying to address the issue of parishioners who feel inferior because they're single. And they're saying that for too long the church has focused on the nuclear family as being the sort of centre of, you know, morality in society. And actually it leaves a lot of people left out. And they point to Jesus. They say it's no sin to be single. Of course, he was famously single, good enough for God's own flesh and blood. They're celebrating that. I thought that was really fascinating. We are increasingly a single society, aren't we?
Well, is there a stigma with being single?
Well, I think they're saying they felt there has been, and the church wants to say you're welcome, and we we recognise you. It's got to be a good thing.
Church of England's just grateful to have anybody a member. They will.
Apparently, in the past 10 years, the number of people living alone in Britain has risen by more than 8%, and a quarter of households in London and a third in Scotland are just single people.
A lot of people very happy being single, very happy in their own company, and loneliness then for people who are less well sort of suited to it accompanies. I tell you, I would worry about being single now or on my own since I fell down the stairs, and the amount of people I hear that fall. And luckily there was someone there to lift them up, or someone to phone an ambulance, or someone to look after them. But it would frighten me being on my own. What would happen?
I think if I was single and I had a spare room and I was in that situation, I might consider a lodger or something.
Yes, I'd consider that's a good
you
idea.
Could have a little bit of income. Why have you got a twinkle in your eye?
Because I'm thinking of the type of lodger I would have.
Oh, here we go. Would it be sort of a nurse?
A friend.
Attractive nurse.
Someone that would care for me.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, let us know, does that story resonate with you? Perhaps you are single, perhaps you are a Church of England goer, and for too long you have felt a second-class citizen, and how welcome is it to see the Church recognise your single status?
Okay.
Let us know.
Let us know. Stay with us and we'll tell you about a new scam. This one, we talk about deep fake. Well, this sees criminals using technology to actually recreate your voice. Matter of fact, it may well be your voice from lots of clips and whatever. And then
make it sound distressed, and then play it to your loved ones as a scam. Really alarming. All the details after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very nice to see you again, 26 minutes past the hour.
Still to come on today's programme. At 6:45, we'll be speaking to the inspiring man who, despite being rejected for over 100 jobs, never gave up and has now landed his dream role.
7:15, as the country makes final preparations for the coronation, we'll find out what's being planned for an iconic piece of London's skyline. Where are you watching from? Let us know where you're watching from.
Where will you be watching from? Your living room? I think I will with the kids.
Yeah, well, I presume that, yes, I presume that's where I will be if I'm not working. But I think you begin to see signs that the coronation is happening, buses with adverts on it. You see
all the flags have gone up.
Flags are going up.
I was on the street the other day and that was looking very royal.
I saw a report the other night on a factory in Yorkshire that makes the flags.
Oh, right.
And gosh, they're working flat out. And so there's the flags, there's floral displays,
Oh,
there's
the
street
florists.
parties planned.
Yeah.
So by and large, we've
Bunting
got
creators.
Saturday week we've
Yeah.
got before it all happens. Let us know what you're doing.
And we'll be in Buckingham Palace all week next week, broadcasting from there, won't we, from
Yes,
Tuesday, which
we
is
will.
exciting.
Right.
So it's Coronation fever kicking in. Let us know, how will you be celebrating the coronation? Send me your
I don't fancy a bit of that flan though.
I'm not a quiche lover. I think, yeah, not.
I mean, like you look at Coronation chicken, and I
Can't beat
simply-
it.
I can lick my lips.
Yeah,
at that.
same.
You know, whether it's a sandwich or a salad or.
But
you
what
know.
type of quiche? I mean, I know this is a specific recipe, this Coronation quiche, but do you have a quiche that you do like, or?
Well, yes, it would have to have meat or bacon in it,
Right.
something like that, and cheese, lots of
Yeah.
cheese. Something relatively
I
substantial.
like a salmon-y one, but I wouldn't necessarily choose a quiche as my, dish of the day.
Yes.
If I was king or queen.
Okay. If I ruled the world.
What would be your signature dish? There's a thought. If it was
Well, I
your
think-
coronation,
I think-
what would be your signature dish?
I think a bacon sandwich.
Oh, come on. That's not
Or a
regal.
crusty, a sort of crusty roll, a baguette with
You
bacon
would like a
in it.
crusty roll as your signature dish.
But I would be a man of the people if I was king.
No, that's what people don't want that.
Do they not?
No.
What about these Egypts that come out and say, not
my
my king, not my king? What?
But they're all scruffy.
But what? Why do you wake up in the morning and say, right, today I'm going to protest that Charles is going to be...
How are they not at work?
What is he? Is he coronated?
No, he's crowned.
He's crowned, okay.
I once got corrected on that by Philip Hammond, former Chancellor of the Exchequer, when I was talking about being coronated. And he said, no, I think
There's
you'll
no such
find
word.
that's crowned.
Crowned. But, it's like, how can you be bothered? Gosh sake, the country, honestly, whatever you think, the revenue it brings into the country, having the royals, they're like our equivalent of Disney. It's just amazing, they're there and everybody
You'll miss them when it's gone.
travels
That's
around
what
the
I
world.
think. It's like the BBC. Everyone that slams the BBC, you'll miss them when it's gone.
Okay, we're now going to go and play this sting and be back right after this. Right. Scams, and here's another one. It's for years a common scam has involved getting a call from someone pretending to be
Your bank or something.
Right, exactly. Right, asking you to pass over money or passwords or numbers for your bank accounts and all that sort of thing.
But just because why not? Things have got even worse thanks to AI, and now they're upping the ante even more. We're being warned to be extra vigilant because scammers are using artificial intelligence to clone your loved ones' voices and use them for distress scam calls.
So we know about fakery now and deep fakery as well. Joining us to tell more about this one, online security expert at McAfee. That's Oliver. Is it Devane or Devan, Oliver?
Devane.
Devane, good man, Oliver. How do I know it's really you?
Well, you'll just have to take my word for it today, but it truly is me.
But you see, the thing is, my friend, what we're talking about now, just explain to us how this new scam using a voice that people would be familiar of, the voice of a loved one, how it actually works. What do they do?
Exactly, yeah. So how it used to work is you would normally receive a message from an unknown number, and they'll claim to be someone you know, and they'll say, I was involved in a car crash, or I've been arrested and I need help. Can you please send me some money to get me out of this situation? But what the scammers are doing now is they're actually cloning the voice of the person they're claiming to be. So when you receive the phone call or say a WhatsApp message with an audio clip, it will sound like your son potentially. It's much more believable. And,
But Oliver, where would they get the material to build up that voice bank?
Well, if they've got plenty of material of you or me, if you're in the public, it must be quite a public eye. It must be easier. We're probably more vulnerable to this than other people, are we not?
Exactly, yeah. And that's actually what they're doing. So, unfortunately, kind of social media, everyone posts every single thing that they do now, kind of in real time. So, I was taking a look last night at both of your social medias.
Oh, no.
Let's imagine I was a scammer, and let's go back to last year. So, Isabel, I believe you went to Venice in September, October
I
time?
did, yeah.
So if I was a scammer targeting you, and I saw that you were in Venice at the time, and let's say you're going onto Instagram Live and you're saying, I'm going to go to this amazing restaurant, I'm going to go on this boat trip, So as a scammer, I would see that, and then I'll have all the information I need to target one of your loved ones. So I'll go through the rest of your social media, get your video clips, extract the audio, upload that to my voice cloning software, which will generate an exact copy of your voice, and then anything I type, hit enter, it will sound as if you're saying it. I'll then message one of your loved ones and say, I'm in Venice, I've been on a boat accident, I dropped my purse in the water, I've lost my phone, I've lost my purse, I don't have any bank cards, I need money now. Obviously, I can't access my bank, so can you send it to someone who I've just met who's willing to take cash out for me? Please do it. More than likely, because it sounds just like you, they know you in Venice, they'll probably do it.
Well, the really clever bit about this, Oliver, I would have thought that...
Can you press mute your end? Might be able to stop the sound coming back. There we go.
What I would have thought was that the victim would have had to have said the exact words, but you're saying this is amazing. That you just get a tone, you get a feel for someone's voice, and you can make them say anything that you want them to say.
It's exactly that, Eamonn. So, I mean, you only need probably 30 to 45 seconds of voice, and you can do a pretty good clone. Yeah, you don't need much at all. And you don't need to, like you said, I don't need to kind of cut it and paste it together.
Yeah.
It will just generate that voice.
Right, so now that you've given a detailed description of how someone can do a deep fake of us, what's the advice to someone like my mum who might be receiving that call to make sure that they're not being scammed?
Yeah, so if you receive a call from an unknown number and they claim to be someone you know, then that should kind of raise alarm bells and red flags, and you should try to contact the person who they're claiming to be. But something else I would advise people to do is be careful what you post on social media. So if you do go on holiday, maybe don't post it until you're back home. Then people know you're home. You can still show everyone what a great time you had and everything you did, but you're not giving like a live commentary. And something else you can do is subscribe to, say, a identity theft protection service. So if your information was to go out there on the internet or on underground forums, they will alert you to let you know that your information's there, and they'll help you take action to kind of protect yourself and make you more aware of kind of the scams that could occur due to that.
Yeah. Well, the only thing is, there's two things in my point of view. One, I don't have any money.
I was going to say.
And secondly, I think my kids would say, yeah, kill him. Cut his fingers off. That's fine.
Oh, my poor mama would totally fall for it. Although I maintain my mum knows me well enough. She'd ask questions. I'd have a different voice for my mum.
OK, that's a good point. So she asks questions. Can you adapt a script then in front of her? If her mum says, what's the weather like there? Can you reply to that there and then, Oliver?
Yeah, so, I mean, if I type something and press enter, I can generate your voice in like 1 or 2 seconds. So I can react. And I can also do like a text to voice, a voice to text. So I could speak, have it convert it to text, and have the audio come out as if it's you speaking.
This deep fakery is incredible. I've been watching a couple of dramas on the streaming services recently, and it's just amazing. If they are true, there's just no protection for all of us. They can make you look from a video point of view that you've been somewhere, that you've said something.
But you know, you take that higher up than us. You take it to the Prime Minister authorising something in his voice.
Yeah.
You know, where does it end? No wonder we're all terrified of AI.
Yes, it's
I'll say it again. You know, I think it's bad. I think we should heed the warning of Elon Musk, who says we need to press pause on everything.
Got to press pause on you, Oliver. Thanks for scaring the wits out of us this morning. Well, look, we'd love to talk to you again, find out more about this, but this really is quite a serious trend. Thanks for making us aware of it. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you very much indeed.
Right. Well, if that hasn't scared you off, put you off your breakfast.
No, your trouble is you now just say too much. You're on that social media and you say too much.
I do not.
You obviously do.
Because he looked up Venice.
Yeah.
That was. I rarely post anything personal on my social media, but it was my 40th, and I didn't post it till I got home.
So what was that? 17 years ago? How long ago was that?
Stop it.
Was it recent? The 40th? Was it?
September. You're so rude.
You sure that's not?
You are so rude. Here I am, getting up day after day.
Why don't you embrace age? Why don't you embrace age? Look at me. Look at me. People say to me, Eamonn, how do you look so well for your age? They do. They say it all the time.
Well, don't they say there's no wrinkles on a balloon?
I worked very hard at maintaining this weight. Very, very hard.
Only friends can talk to each other like this. Loving insults.
I don't like you.
Well, true.
Then they'll take that and they'll put it in the fakery. I don't like you, and they'll say...
You just said it. They don't need to fake it.
No, I know, but say they changed it to something and say, I adore you. Do you know when people fight, it's actually because they fancy each other?
I know you adore me deep down. I've got messages saying you adore me. Right, 6:37, stay with us as we discuss the Health Secretary Steve Barclay becoming the latest minister to be accused of bullying. We'll go through the papers coming up with Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Right, it's at 20 to 7.
It is, and we're going to bring you up to date with this morning's front pages of the newspaper.
Where's this tie gone? Where's this tie gone today? It's got a life of its own today. It's crept over like a snake.
Let's go to The Guardian. It's leading with concerns raised over Steve Barclay's conduct towards civil servants, as the Health Secretary is the latest cabinet minister to be accused of bullying and bad behaviour.
The Express draws attention to Suella Braverman's vow to put more police on the streets.
Here's the Mail. It's reporting on the controversial Coronation guest list, which includes the Sinn Féin leader Michelle O'Neill and the Chinese official responsible for authoritarian crackdowns in Hong Kong.
Metro, American magazine writer E. Jean Carroll, who has appeared in court accusing the former president, Donald Trump, of rape.
And The Times. It's no sin to be single, according to the Church of England, who've called for its flock to honour singleness since Jesus himself never married.
Do you know what I think's a miracle?
What's a miracle?
Go back to the paper, please. Yes. So Camilla here on the front
of the waxwork.
The paper, yeah, which is a waxwork.
Mm-hmm.
But
very,
it looks so real. Now, that's either that's a really good waxwork or Camilla looks like a waxwork. You can't work out. I can't work out. No, but I'm just saying, it's either a compliment.
Say that.
Why not?
Well, look, of all the royals to insult, you could probably get away with it.
I'm not insulting her. I'm simply saying...
You just questioned whether she looks waxy.
The statue is either superb or she looks like a waxwork.
It's a superb waxwork.
It's very good. Very,
honestly,
very good. Do you know, I think they've got the hair right. Everything is very, very right. Oh, very good. Very nice. But that's what women do most days anyway. They put on a mask.
True story.
Yes, you see, so they look one way, and then they put on that mask, that makeup and hair, and that's the way they look.
Really look.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't deny it. Right, let's go through the papers this morning. We're joined by the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and the political consultant and journalist, Emma Burnell. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Freddie, shall we start then with the Coronation guest list, which seems to be quite controversial?
Yes, the Telegraph have led with this story, and it's obviously the coronation coming up. And Han Zhen, the Chinese vice president, who is in fact the 8th most powerful man in China, according to the rankings in the newspaper. He's going to be coming to the coronation, and this is very controversial because he was the architect of the clampdown, the brutal clampdown in Hong Kong against pro-democracy protesters. I mean, it is difficult to do an invitation for an event like this. We probably do have to invite a representative from China because of China's great importance in the global economy and so on. But it puts the government in a difficult position because the government is trying to pursue this twin-track approach to China, which it's copied from the Biden administration in America, which is to challenge China where you can, but also to cooperate with China where you can. And post-pandemic, I think a lot of people are suspicious of that. We know that American intelligence agencies think that the COVID came from a military lab. We know that China's never been transparent about the origins of the virus. And people say this is sort of conspiracy theorism, but it isn't. The fact is China wrecked the global economy because it was irresponsible about COVID, and it's never been honest about what happened with COVID. That, on top of the Hong Kong thing, which is important too, is why a lot of people now feel China is an irresponsible superpower. And how do other powers deal with it? We're not a superpower anymore, sadly. How do we deal with a more powerful country that is effectively malign on the world stage?
And we're home to 70,000 Hong Kongers who were given emergency visas last year to escape the work of this man.
Well,
and
exactly.
here he will be being celebrated in the highest
way. And King Charles has been quite outspoken about China. He was there at the handover in 1997. And he said things before, like, he doesn't like the leadership. Called them waxworks, speaking of
his wife.
Waxworks. Maybe his wife was a deep fake.
I'm really taken aback that Sinn Féin and the Sinn Féin leader and deputy president, Michelle O'Neill, has said yes to this. I mean, I think this is a huge sign of progress and trust, both from Sinn Féin, from a Republican perspective, and from the establishment in terms of the royal family, given the history between the two. That's amazing. But by and large, isn't this not about space being at a premium, that so many people aren't invited, that he's tried to trim down? And I just always wonder, why does he end up inviting, or why do they end up inviting a lot of people who shouldn't really be there, just because they have to?
Well, there'll be tons of people
Hangers
from
on.
the NHS workers, key workers, British sort of ordinary but really, well...
But why? Why are they invited?
Worthy people. Because they're sort of the backbone of Britain. They're all being invited in.
And I think there's a difference between a coronation, which is a state occasion, and, say, if he were getting married again, which obviously he's not because he's been married to Camilla for quite some time, but a wedding is a private event. Royal weddings are a hybrid event between private and public, but a coronation is simply a public event. It's not, this is my new job party. It's a state occasion in which we will do all the pomp and ceremony that Britain love and we're very good at. But actually, this is about the crowning of a new head of state, and that's why there has to be all the diplomacy around it. And interestingly, I think it says extraordinary things about how much things have changed since I was young, that the Chinese leader is the more controversial invite than the Sinn Féin, and a woman with family IRA connections. And I think that shows an extraordinary... we had the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement recently.
I think amazing that she's invited, and I can understand how constitutionally she's invited, because if there was a government in Northern Ireland, she would be the First Minister. But also that she has accepted that the Republican movement has said, right, we will acknowledge this, and it's sort of quite civilised. Incidentally, I thought you explained that very, very well.
Thank you.
Very well, yeah.
We should also point out that Meghan has done the nation a favour by probably
Swerving it.
by swerving it. She's freed up a place.
She's doing what?
Yeah, maybe Fergie
She's not
could
coming,
come.
so she's freed up a place.
Can I ask, were there any
Yeah.
controversial invitees to the Queen's coronation?
I'm sure there
Is
was.
this, I mean, I wonder if any historians or history buffs at home could pull out of a hat any names of people that, you know, ruffled feathers back in 1953.
I mean, I was thinking about this. We were in a very different place in terms of deference to the establishment in the 50s. So there would have been far less, certainly, public discussion or criticism, either of the monarchy itself or of, you know, the great and the good who were being invited. It would have been much more expected as just part of how that would have happened. So I think there was a lot less scrutiny and a lot less, there's now, and a lot more deference, and I think we've gone kind of the other way round now.
Well, speaking of scrutiny and criticism of the great and the good, Steve Barclay, the latest member of the Cabinet, to be accused of bullying by civil servants, and this makes the front page of The Guardian.
Yeah, Steve Barclay, there have been no formal complaints, but there have been discussions at high level about his behaviour. This is going to be a Rorschach test, I think. You know, some people will see this as the civil service yet again pushing their luck in terms of bullying allegations. Others, including myself, will see this as part of a cultural problem, that there isn't just, you know, one bad apple, that awful phrase that people misuse and misunderstand a lot anyway. But it wasn't just a case that Dominic Raab or previously to him, Priti Patel, were particularly egregious, but actually there's a culture that's come in and been allowed to fester, so that there's a lot of government ministers not necessarily reaching the standard that Raab did, where, you know, he was fully investigated, the standard where Priti Patel did, where she was fully investigated, but that there is a culture of just bad workplace behaviour coming from ministers.
Is there a culture of bad workplace behaviour? Is there a culture of victimhood? And also, is it not libellous to be making these allegations without evidence and proof and putting them on the front of a newspaper? I mean, extraordinary.
I just think for the rest of our, well, certainly until the Tory government's finished, there's going to be some minister kicking about in the pages of The Guardian being accused of bullying. It's a sort of endless story that never stops and never really amounts to anything. I mean, we didn't really have any serious proof of bullying that Dominic Raab did. I appreciate that this story apparently originated before the Dominic Raab case. But so far, and we always have to say, you know, he could have done something horrendous, but so far we have evidence that he's shouted, that he exudes machismo, that he micromanages. I'd say the worst of those potential crimes is probably micromanaging. But
I can't say that looking at him I've ever thought, that's a man who exudes machismo.
No, he doesn't.
I thought you were going to say something different there. But,
I think he thinks he does.
That is there is obviously quite often with a lot of people who would love to think they exuded machismo, the difference between their self-perception and
they're
the
making
perception
up
of others.
for their lack of machismo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The version of short man syndrome that you often see.
Yeah, you know, I definitely think when bullying manifests itself and it's serious, and I always worry about making claims against something that is not as serious as it's made out to be. But when it is serious, you know the difference, and you know evil people. And I'll just say, I can't be accused of not using two words in my life that I'm proud of and very happy to when faced with a lot of bullying. And just using it giving it with both barrels, because sometimes you find these people, if they're in a position of power, they can do what they want, of course.
I think that's the danger in all of this, that actually by making allegations without necessarily being able to back them up, you minimise the effects of genuine bullying, which we know, and we talked about this last week, Freddie, can lead to people taking their own lives or terrible depression. It's the worst thing if there is an abuse of power and you know, belittlement. It's terrible.
I mean, I think that is absolutely true. The problem is that the opposite is also true, in that every time there's an allegation of bullying, we run to our political corners and say, no, that's not bullying at all, or yes, that's always bullying, and then switch that around depending on which rosette the person accused is wearing. Then we are not looking at deeper cultural issues about how to be a productive workplace, and which we really need the civil service to be, and how to get the best from people in a productive workplace. And I think there are cultural shifts that we need to look at.
Good. Emma, thank you again. Well subbed up. Freddie, thank you very much indeed. See you guys again in about 40 minutes' time. Thank you. They say hard work never goes unnoticed. Our next guest is a testament to that. Right. His name's Taz Aldik. Taz is 29 years of age, and he's been in the news this week because he admitted to being knocked back not 10, not 20, not 50, not 70, not 80, but 100 times when it came to applying for a job.
And that's despite having 3 degrees, as well as a master's, and what meant that Taz ended up spending 18 months on benefits before he finally secured his dream of becoming a barrister. Well done, you. And you could have quite easily given up, couldn't you? And become a barista instead.
Close, not going to lie. It was a long, arduous process, but honestly, I'm just happy to be on the other side of it.
Taz, what did you learn? What did you learn through all of this that you would have done, anything you would have done differently?
I learned a few things. I think the first thing I learned is that not all advice is good advice, and just that to follow your gut when it comes to these things. Like, there were many times along the way where I wasn't sure of myself. I was doubting whether I could get it over the line, and just accepting the process is going to be long. It's going to be a lot of rejection, and just making those adjustments along the way really did let me actually make it happen and just get over the line in the end.
Do you think that your experience is typical of entry-level barristers, or do you think that you were perhaps doing something wrong in that process?
No, I think it's absolutely, it is quite typical, because if you look at the statistics, it can be around 15% qualify and get pupillage. So essentially, the statistics of actually getting it over the line are very low to begin with. And there are a lot of factors that come into play to being successful. Luck is one of them. Hard work is another one. But a lot of things have to go right. Contacts in the profession, people who can review your application, prepare you for interview, and all this has to kind of come together to make it.
Do you know, honestly, I sit here and I know within a few minutes, I could tell whether I would want to work with someone or want to have them on board. I think the process, though, Taz, from anybody, no matter if you're applying to work in a supermarket or you're getting into the legal profession or whatever, I think it can be made unduly complicated. And you're a legal man. Do you understand why it is unduly complicated? I mean, what are they looking to avoid? I mean, you don't want to hire someone that's not qualified, not capable, but the divide line between success and failure must be very, very slim.
Absolutely. Anyone being invited to interview is good enough, tends to be. Especially if you get to second interview, you're good enough to do the job. Yeah. Now it's a question of them having their pick of the litter, really, and looking at not just your educational background, your experience, but really sometimes it can just be a personality thing as well. Like you said, eventually in chambers, for example, you're going to be there. It's like a marriage. You're going to be there potentially 15 to 20 years. So sometimes it's not just about what's down on paper. It's about, can I work with this person for the foreseeable?
It's got to be the right fit.
Tell me, Taz, do you wear a wig at work?
Not yet, but I will be. I need one.
And it'll be like a whole alter ego, a whole different character as well. Look, all I'm going to say, my friend, is you're over the line, you've got the job, you're on that conveyor belt. Please enjoy the journey, because it took you a long time.
It's not easy being a barrister.
Well, it's not easy being lots of things, but it's obviously not easy getting through job interviews.
Yeah.
That's it.
Creme de la creme.
One last thought for anybody who's facing an interview today. Any word of advice to them?
I think my word of advice would be accept you're going to be nervous and just go in and be yourself and do your best and take the feedback on board moving forward.
Good advice. Taz Aldik, congratulations, and thanks for inspiring us this morning. I'll always remember you, Eamonn, saying to me, it's amazing, the harder you work, the luckier you become. And I do think that's true. You just got to hang in there.
It can be. Thanks for passing our little audition today, Taz. You're on a roll, mate. You're on a roll. Thank you very much indeed. God bless. Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll bring you more.
He's from a lovely part of the world there. He's from Wimslow in Cheshire.
Well, you could live up there, couldn't you? Love it. Well, you did used to. Anyway, we have to get to the weather.
Could never afford a house in Wimslow.
No, true. It's very expensive. We're going to be talking about the teachers' strikes in just a moment. First of all, though, your all-important Thursday forecast with Alex Deakin.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. It's been a pretty cold first half of the week, but it is going to be turning warmer as we head towards the weekend. There will be some heavy rain around too. Today's weather pattern is a battle between high and low pressure, with the low eventually set to win out. This weather front already bringing some cloud and rain across parts of Scotland, snow on the hills, but really only over the tops of the hills and mountains. A damp start in southern parts of Scotland. The central belt probably turning drier later. Something a bit brighter compared to yesterday over northern and eastern England, but generally clouding over as these weather fronts bring cloud and rain in from the southwest. Some uncertainty about how far north that rain gets and how heavy it is, but most places will see some rain by the end of today. A little milder, but still temperatures generally a touch below average for this time of year, and obviously not feeling very mild with the wet weather spreading in. As I said, some heavier bursts around, covering a good chunk of the country. Certainly the potential for heavy rain in most places through this evening, before gradually you can see this big body of rain swirling around starts to head out into the North Sea. With cloud, rain and a brisk breeze, it will be a much milder night than we've had over recent nights. And then on to Friday. Yes, early on it's cloudy and for most it is wet, but quite quickly that rain should be petering out. And I'm reasonably optimistic tomorrow will turn out to be a bright, fine day for South West Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and South West England. Eastern areas may well stay rather glum and cloudy, but even here the rain should be easing off. A bit chilly on some North Sea coast for sure, but further south and west with some sunshine, temperatures much higher than they have been for much of this week. And that trend continues into the weekend. There'll be some sunny spells around this weekend, but you will have to dodge the downpours. Some heavy showers in places throughout the long weekend, but it will be milder.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Schools face mass disruption as tens of thousands of teachers stage fresh walkouts.
Hello there, very good morning. Good to have you on board. 1 minute past 7, Thursday the 27th of April. Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Schools in England face closures today as teachers hold mass strikes. All major education unions have rejected the government's offer of a 4.3% pay rise, with the NEU branding it insulting.
This morning, the Health Secretary will bring a legal challenge against a proposed 48-hour nurses' strike that starts on Sunday. The leader of the Royal College of Nursing has accused Steve Barclay of treating healthcare workers like criminals.
The illegal migration bills passed through the House of Commons despite criticism from some Conservative MPs. The bill is expected to run into more opposition when it faces the House of Lords, where it could be heavily amended.
Evacuation flights from Sudan could continue after the end of the ceasefire. That's tonight. According to the army officer in charge of the operation, so far over 500 British nationals have been rescued.
And a diplomatic storm is brewing after it was revealed that the architect of China's crackdown on Hong Kong will attend the King's coronation. Politicians have reacted with fury, calling his attendance an insult.
Well, what would you call his attendance? Get in touch the usual way. Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk, and let us know where you're watching or listening to us from today.
I've got a few I can quickly read out.
Yes.
Lots of people were getting in touch about your tie earlier on, saying that it's a good job that you're wearing one.
Look, it's moved again. Wait a minute. Just no, wait a minute. Let me just get this in the middle.
There you go. You're looking good.
No, is that in the middle?
No.
Maybe the tie's in the right place.
I think it's too tight, if I'm honest.
And my neck's in the wrong place. But if you don't do it tight, then you see a button, and I don't like that.
I can see a button and all the rest.
Well, instead of being useless...
In the break, I'll sort it out. I've tried already, but it's so tight I can barely move it. Is that better, folks? Yeah. Anyway, lots of views coming in on striking. Unbelievable. Parents get fined for taking children out of school for a week's holiday, but some teachers are striking today. Non-pupil day Friday, bank holiday Monday, and then strike again Tuesday. It's like another half term. My wife and I will lose £100 today. The teachers are on strike and we have a low working income, so we'll lose £100. Our son, who has autism, found it hard enough during the pandemic and fell more behind with his schoolwork and will lose 2 days of education. That's from John and Dee. Keep your thoughts coming in.
Unless you get sympathy with the teachers.
Well, it's possible to have both. I mean, someone's industrial complaint shouldn't impact on somebody else, I don't think, in the way that it is.
No, it should.
Especially
or
children.
It doesn't work.
Children.
You have this thing about children.
Yes.
Why do your children the most important people in the megaverse?
Because they are the future. They already, we know, suffered throughout
So you're
lockdown.
the sort that give children an opinion.
No, I'm not.
You
I want
listen
to protect
children.
because I think
children are there to be
precious.
told what to do.
Yes, I agree. In school. And guess what? They're not at school again today for the 5th time this year.
Yeah, which is rather unfortunate.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Do you think it'll make any difference to their education?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Well, I agree to disagree. But actually, don't quote me, quote the Children's Commissioner, Rachel de Souza. She said today she's particularly concerned by the potential for disruption to children's education in light of recent attendance figures, which show that absence from schools rising at an alarming rate. And all these extra days of not turning up gives them licence to do that as well. Plus, it's exam season, Eamonn. People having their A-levels moved today. It's
So if you're going to miss school, this is the best time to miss it.
No, that's going to mess
Give
up
you another
people's
week
whole
to
life.
swat up.
And we know
whatever.
that people's exams and their education has life impacts on their
It does, on their life. A life
This is
impact
why
on their life.
I'm like a child, whatever you want to call it,
Possessed.
ambassador.
OK. Let us know your views. So, school is our top story this morning. Tens of thousands of teachers in England are going to walk out today after members of the National Education Union, otherwise known as NEU, rejected the government's pay, calling it insulting.
Well, all major teaching unions have now rejected the 4.3% wage rise, warning the disruption will get worse unless a deal is reached.
Now, this follows the closure of most schools in Northern Ireland yesterday. In Scotland, teachers have suspended strike action, with the union urging its members to accept the offer they have been made of a 12% pay increase.
Yeah,
so that's
above
a big
inflation.
one. Yeah, that's a big one.
Well, joining us this morning is former advisor to then Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi, and he is Mark Lahane. I believe you're also still a teacher, so perfect to talk to about all of this. Look, I've been sort of singing the reasons why children shouldn't suffer in all of this, but just give us the argument from the teachers' point of view, because they're talking about a real terms cut to their pay over the last decade, aren't they?
Yeah, so first thing, I haven't been a teacher for a few years now, I'm afraid.
Sorry.
So no, that's all right. So listen, why are teachers on strike today? So what the National Education Union and other unions will tell you is that since 2010, the real value of the pay that teachers get has been eroded by inflation. Although there have been pay rises since then, the pay rises haven't kept pace with the cost of living increases since then. And they've got a point. Teacher pay has declined over time a little bit, depending on what measure you look at. It's between 17 and maybe 9% it's come down by. However, what people like myself and probably you, Isabel, listening to what you said this morning, would argue is that even though pay has come down for teachers, the strikes are not necessarily the best way to resolve that issue. As you said, these are the first strikes we've had since all of the teaching unions, there's 4 main ones, since all 4 unions rejected the government's offer, which actually was pretty generous. It offered all teachers currently in the job a £1,000 bonus for this year and up to 4.5% increase for next year. But that was rejected. That offer has been taken off the table now. And so the people that are going to determine what the next pay offer isn't going to be the government. There aren't any more negotiations. It's going to be the independent pay body that does that stuff for teachers. And we won't know what they're recommending, or even the government won't know what the recommendations from that independent pay body will be for about another month. So the question as to what we do between now and then is quite a big one. And I don't know what the answer to that is.
Well, at the moment, the answer is striking. How else does the union, do the teachers get people to take them seriously if they don't do that, Mark?
Well, what is a real shame is that when the last offer was put by the government to the teaching unions, part of the conditions from the government was, please, when you put this offer to your members, we need you to put it to them in a neutral fashion. We're not asking you to go out and say this is the best thing since sliced bread. We just want you to put it to them in a neutral fashion. However, the National Education Union immediately went back to its members and said, this is a ridiculous offer, you should reject it. So straight away, we had the unions breaking the spirit of the agreement or in which those negotiations had taken place. I understand people's frustration. Teachers, as I've said repeatedly when I've been on this channel over the last few months, teachers have done a phenomenal amount of work the last few years getting young people through the pandemic. However, these strikes are continuing to erode the quality of young people's education. And as you were just saying before we came onto this, attendance at schools right now has fallen through the floor. 1 in 5 young people has missed more than 10% of their school days so far this academic year. That is more than double the level of persistent absence since before the pandemic. So we know the impact that the pandemic had on children's attendance. We know that even more days being missed by strike action is not going to make things any better. And it undermines the credibility. These strikes undermine the credibility that teachers have in terms of saying to children, you need to come into school and get on with stuff. Because as one of your viewers sent in a message just now saying, what credibility do teachers have saying kids need to be in school if they've been closing schools themselves through strikes?
OK. Mark, thanks very much indeed. Mark's a former government advisor on education, speaking to us live from Bedford this morning. In the studio, Millie Cook, who's a political reporter with the Daily Express here. And this really is, we thought there was a stage this year when everybody seemed to be settling. And, the legal people were settling, the trained people were settling. And we thought maybe this was coming to an end. But when you look at the settlement in Scotland at 14% compared to the 4% being offered here, there is a big gulf, isn't there?
There absolutely is. And I think this morning we are likely to see huge amounts of disruption as a result of unions just not feeling like they've been offered enough. So what they're asking for today is an above-inflation pay increase. And they're demanding that that's a fully funded pay rise. So they essentially want to make sure that any pay rise they're offered doesn't come out of the budget for education, so it doesn't come out of what students are being given in resources. So it's got to be a kind of a clean extra 10% for teachers, which is a lot, I think.
Let's talk about the pressure that the Health Secretary's under, not only coping with the backlog and the aftermath of the pandemic, but also we've got the doctors' strikes, we've got the nurses' strikes. He's taking nurses to court, isn't he, today? He's saying he's got little choice. But he's also been accused of bullying by his civil servants.
Yeah, it's not a good week for Steve Barclay. I think it's quite a difficult one because with the legal case that's happening today, he's taking them to court over what is effectively a technicality. So he's looking at the time at which they balloted nurses. So they balloted 6 months ago, the ballot expired at midday, and nurses are trying to strike until midnight 6 months later. So it's effectively kind of, you know, it's a 12-hour window that he's fighting them over, which really sums up how far relations between unions and the government have deteriorated. And meanwhile, he's also being accused of bullying. So it's kind of, it's a tricky week for him.
Absolutely. And the strikes right across the board. I mean, we should point out yesterday, late in the day, and he's been tweeting about this, Steve Barclay, midwives settled. They agreed, ended their industrial action. But then we had news last night that HMRC's going on strike. And as Eamonn was saying earlier, it just seems never-ending, this kind of strike mission. And the fact that inflation is stubbornly refusing to come down significantly is really helping the unions out in all of this, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that's obviously why the government is bringing in their anti-strike legislation, which they kind of argue is not really an anti-strike bill. So they're saying it's not a crackdown on strikes, but unions themselves feel like it's massively impinging on their right to strike. So what the legislation would do is to set minimum service levels to make sure that we don't see mass disruption throughout the year like we have so far. So the teacher strike today is going to be the 4th and 5th days of strike action that we've seen so far, and just since the start of the year. So the government really is trying to remedy that, but it's looking like a tall order.
Millie, appreciate your take. Millie's a political reporter with the Daily Express. Thank you very much.
Have you noticed that a lot of this strike action seems to be bolted on around bank holiday weekends? I mean, the doctors did it around Easter, didn't they? The weekend between Easter and this time the teachers are going to be off on Tuesday after a long bank holiday weekend. I'm not suggesting anything, but I'm sure they're going to enjoy 4 days of not being in school.
Where do you go? Where do you go over bank holiday weekends? I think the worst thing about bank holiday weekends is that most people get them. Therefore,
you're all off at the same time.
Yeah, there's too many people about, so you don't want to be in an airport, you don't want to be on a motorway.
There's a lot you can do in 4 days. You go to... I mean, look how hot it is in Spain this week. It's sort of
what I'm saying is I don't want to be... Yeah, but I'd rather be doing that in the weekend when people aren't all off, you know, than when they are.
But it's easier to do if you've got consecutive days. That's what I'm saying. You know, if you've got 4 days off as opposed to 2,
I've really gone off travel
somewhere.
though, because you know, just the idea that there's just chaos with passports, with checking your passports and your documentation, with Brexit, with extra visas that are needed. I mean, I have an Irish passport, so therefore it doesn't affect me.
Well, my husband has an Irish passport, and I learnt last night that entitles me to get whizzed through the EU. He said to me, "Is that not right?"
No, it's not right.
His spouse, he said, could be whizzed through the fast
lane. No, believe me, no, it's quite funny that my spouse, who is English, of course, and doesn't qualify.
Are you
for
sure?
This. No, I'm sure. She does not
falsely
qualify.
Informed.
So I'm not saying under what circumstances that you would qualify. You would have to have lived at least 6 months in Ireland.
But just for the fast lane in the airport, he said I could be whizzed through the non-EU lane with him.
Well, I'd be happy to abuse that situation.
I'll give it a go anyway.
Yeah.
Right, let's turn our attention. Go on. No, sorry, go on.
I remember being at the airport at Gatwick, and there was massive queue, snaking queue through passport control. And this passport person came to me and said, "Mr. Holmes, you're on a crutch there. You're obviously very tired. Whatever. Let me take you through this fast lane. Come with here." And my wife goes, no, we couldn't do that. We couldn't do that. We couldn't go ahead of everybody else. I said, well, OK, love, you stand there.
Yeah,
okay.
He left her for dust.
And I collected the suitcases, everything else at the other end, and that was it. But, I mean, it was legitimate because of my disablement. We should talk about that one day. We should talk about how places are not geared up to handle disabled people. They're not geared up to handle wheelchairs, crutches, any sort of accessibility. Really, really bad. I can preach now.
So many of our audience will be able to relate to that. We should definitely talk about that. Let's make time on another programme.
And the time is 7:15. Yes.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
More than 400 workers from His Majesty's Revenue and Customs will take industrial action in May and June. Here we are, more striking. PCS members will strike for 18 days over the 2 months amid a dispute over pay, pensions, jobs and redundancy. The union says the government has until later today to make a fair offer to stop the strikes.
Labour claims the government are abandoning first-time buyers. This comes as an English housing survey shows that only a third of children born this year in England will own a home by the time they reach their 50s. Labour says they'd get more homes built and actively support first-time buyers.
No, that's not the Queen Consort. That is a waxwork of the
Isn't
Queen's
it?
Consort.
So good.
So Madame Tussauds, how do you pronounce?
Tussauds?
Where some of the statues are rubbish, it has to be said, but not that one. I think that's really, really good. Yeah?
Yeah.
So it's styled, there you are, in a dark blue gown, next to King Charles. He's all right, but I don't think it's his as good as hers.
We nearly saw Harry for a second there when it zoomed out. I want to see a bit of Hazza.
OK, the museum says this is their mark of a new chapter in the British monarchy. Let's bring you up to date on the latest in the Sudan situation. Evacuation flights there could continue after the end of the ceasefire tonight. This is according to the army officer in charge of the whole operation.
Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary's warned the government can't guarantee how many flights will actually be able to depart after the deadline passes.
Now, so far, over 500 British nationals have been rescued from the conflict zone. We're going to get more from Defence and Foreign Affairs editor at the Daily Telegraph, Con Coughlin. Con, good morning to you.
Morning.
Con, you can see the dilemma, you can see the situation. If they can't guarantee security at the airport, they can guarantee very little. I mean, you're not going to get one of those big troop carriers. I mean, it would be a brave official that would put one of those at risk.
Yes, well, this is a very volatile situation in Khartoum. And as you said, there are still thousands of British citizens and others stuck in the capital while these rival factions decide what next when the ceasefire ends. I mean, it is a very difficult situation. I think, the military's on top of it. We've got an airport, we've got an air base, albeit apparently the runway's cracking up, but there is an operation in place to get people out. And I think what the other issue is just how many people want to come home. I mean, I think Andrew Mitchell, the Development Secretary, said earlier in the week that a lot of these people know Khartoum very well, know how to survive, and they may want to just sort of see it through. So, as I say, it's a very difficult and challenging situation for the government and for those people in Khartoum.
Yeah, incredibly frightening. The death toll stands at 512 at the moment, 4,000 wounded. And as we said a moment ago, only 536 of a possible 2,000 have been evacuated. And, these huge planes, things like Hercules, simply not being filled because people aren't able to get to the airstrips where these evacuations are taking place from, or indeed to the ships that are at Port Sudan. Because of the situation that you're describing, it is possible that people who want to be evacuated won't be able to be supported. Is that the case?
There is that possibility, definitely. But I think one of the things people will be looking at in the coming hours will whether you can establish safe corridors. I mean, this is common practice in war zones, that for humanitarian reasons you get both sides to respect humanitarian corridors so that people can flee. We've seen it, for example, in Ukraine. Of course, on some occasions when those convoys were leaving, the Russians attacked them. And that there will be that same possibility in Sudan, which is equally lawless. But there are various measures that can be implemented to get these civilians to safety. And it's a question of working out who wants to leave, where they are, trying to form mustering points, and then getting them to either the airports or the seaports.
Yeah. Con, obviously we're very concerned for Brits abroad there, but we just learnt today that the USA has 20,000 citizens which haven't been taken out of the country yet.
Yeah, well, that's quite a remarkable statistic, particularly as Sudan has been, a very challenging country for decades now. It formerly had an Islamist government that was very anti-Western. It's had a terrorist problem. Remember, Osama bin Laden was based in Sudan until he moved to Afghanistan. So it's not exactly a safe haven for American citizens. And I must say, I was personally surprised to find that there are 20,000 American citizens in Sudan. But I imagine if the Americans are not rushing to get in there, that a lot of these people are very well established in the country and know how to look after themselves. But I mean, it it is quite remarkable that so many Americans should be in this part of the world.
Yeah. What did you make yesterday of the very solid response from the Home Secretary? She was absolutely determined that they will not be providing any safe or legal routes for those fleeing war in Sudan. Do you find that controversial, given the completely different approach to people fleeing war in Ukraine? And what could possibly be the difference and the justification for the difference, do you think?
Well, it is, as I say, there was quite a robust statement. And of course, the Home Secretary is in the process of trying to clamp down on immigration. And I think you'll find that when you look at a lot of the people coming into Britain in the boats, there's a fair proportion of them are Sudanese. So, and I think there is a serious fear in Whitehall that this crisis could result in a lot more Sudanese trying to make their way to the UK. So I suppose she's sending a signal, that Britain is not a soft touch. But I think the wider point is that this is more a UN matter. That if safe corridors are going to be established, they won't just be for Brits. It will be for the entire international community and for the Sudanese who want to get out. To say we've got that template already established for Ukraine. So it is a possibility. I wouldn't say anything more than that. It's a possibility that a similar measure could be implemented in Sudan if the two warring factions, two very violent groups, can be persuaded to allow that to happen.
The big if.
Con, thank you very much indeed. Con Coughlin is the Defence and Foreign Affairs Editor at the Daily Telegraph.
Coming up after this, we'll be discussing the level of sickness absence across the workforce. It's rising to its highest level in almost 20 years. So we'll be asking if workers have gone soft or it's the system that's broken. Stay with us. That debate up next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin,
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
To be honest, me cracking up the studio here as usual. I should be paid to be a comedian, shouldn't I? Stand up here, 27 minutes. Isabel's going, please don't ask me what he's just said to me. No, 27 minutes past 7 o'clock. Can you speak?
I can speak. Still to come on today's programme. Oh, that's floating past me. 7:45. We'll take a look inside the home of the late Queen frontman Freddie Mercury.
So what are we looking at?
Well, he loved his antiques, and apparently he used to spend all of his spare time perusing antiques fairs and antique shops and barns and all the rest of it. And a lot of his possessions are now going up and under the hammer.
Like just ordinary things. Like
well,
this is,
nothing was ordinary because it was Freddie Mercury.
No, but
so
it's
everything
not
that
associated with music is what I'm saying.
No, yeah, his everyday possessions. Oh, that's ironic, isn't it? The show must go on. Oh, so we're going to have a good nose through all of his bits and bobs, which I'm looking forward to.
Do you know how old he would be if he was still alive?
How old?
Guess. 77.
Gosh. You know, sometimes it's good that these icons died young because they haven't had to go through the awful ageing process. You know, you think of Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, Diana.
Elvis 42 when he
Obviously
died.
Tragic that we lost all of them, but they're forever immortalised in these young images.
Jimmy Dean, all
You don't
that
have to
sort
go
of
through the kind of, you know, look at Bridget Bardot and you sort of think, oh, God love her. You know, from being an icon to she's an octogenarian now. It's difficult. Anyway, I'm not suggesting people die, but anyway.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Right, 8:45,
I just wouldn't want to die on the toilet.
Like
That's all.
Elvis.
Like Elvis.
Yeah. It's
what
very common, actually.
Is it dying on the toilet?
Because people strain.
It's constipation.
Yeah.
Is it? And then they burst something, do they? Like a vessel or something.
Yeah, it's not good breakfast chat, though, so I think we'll talk about what's on at 9:45.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a photographer comes in the studio, no ordinary photographer, so she takes pictures like that, but these are sort of deep fake pictures as well. Her name's Alison Jackson. You'll have seen her work with adverts.
She invented deep fakes before deep fakes were invented, you know?
Yes.
Spoof
But you see, I'm not sure that is.
Was that hand on the bottom?
Yes.
Can we go back to that? Were her pants down, or was she just not wearing any trousers? Goodness me.
What, there was a...
It's just cheeky, literally.
We'll get rid of that spoof bit. Right, so I can't see that too much.
He's got his hand on Camilla's bottom.
Is that her panties?
Yes, and I think they're on the royal balcony.
Oh, dear, that's a bit...
cheeky.
It's a bit unnecessary, that.
Yes.
Yes. Wow,
Wow.
there we go.
Yeah, don't miss that one. A little bit later on in the programme. And do keep your thoughts coming in throughout the course of the morning. GBnews at gbnews.uk.
Talk about being on the sick now, throwing a sickie. Levels of sickness last year rose to the highest level in 20 years, according to data from the Office for National Statistics.
Yeah, we lost 185 million working days to sickness in last year alone. That's quite extraordinary, really.
Well, you see, people are entitled to be sick, but why is it going up so much? Worryingly, 500,000 quit their jobs during the pandemic. So, what does that mean? Are we just less healthy? Are we becoming a nation of slackers? Mel Crate is the founding director of Luminate Wellbeing, and says that the system, it's the system that's broken. And there you have Dawn Neeson, who's working again.
The hardest working person you'll ever meet. Never stops.
She is as a journalist. And could I ask you, Dawn, what do you think is being self-employed the biggest motivation to keep you working?
I think it helps, and I think a lot of self-employed people watching and listening today will agree with that. And statistics have proven that if you work in the public sector, you are more likely to take sick than even if you work in the private sector. And the
What's your sick record like?
I can't remember the last time I took a day sick, and that is the God's honest truth.
Didn't you actually work through 2 bouts of pneumonia?
Isabel, I'm not recommending this one to anyone, by the way, but yes, I was editing a national newspaper, and as anyone working in journalism knows, taking a day off is impossible because the news happens constantly. So, yeah, I worked for 2 years solid without taking a day off on holiday because I had a pretty demanding boss, and I developed pneumonia, and I was in hospital for a day, and then I went straight back to work.
Do you recommend that, though?
No, as I said, Isabel, I'm not recommending it in
Yeah.
any way, shape or form. It is actually a very, very stupid thing to do, and if you are genuinely sick, and this is different, if you're genuinely sick, you are, of course, entitled, and you blooming well should take time off to recover. I'm not advocating what I did. I'm also lucky enough to have a job that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
Mel,
sure that helps.
what are you advocating? What way do you see you say the system may be broken rather than people broken?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things at play here. I think, firstly, the way that people view work in the context of their lives has changed. I don't think people want to be chained to their desks anymore, working through sickness, grief, etc. But I also think people are feeling under more pressure now. I don't need to mention the cost of living crisis that people are experiencing, and I think that is taking its toll on people's health, both mental and physical. But we know a big proportion of those sick days will certainly be for stress and mental health related conditions.
And Mel, it's got to be connected to the mission creep of work. From the minute people wake up, they're on their work emails. They can get WhatsApps day and night. There's no delineation between work and home. I mean, I look at the front of the Telegraph today, and they've got a big piece at the top saying, beat the burnout, meet the investment banker, mastering the work-life balance. And people are increasingly struggling with that, aren't they? And perhaps that's why more people are going sick.
Absolutely. And statistics show that since COVID came about, people were working 30 minutes extra each day. And the connection, or I suppose the balance between work and personal lives has certainly blurred since people started working from home more. But also, as you know, we've got technology that connects us to our work round the clock. There is no escape from it anymore. And I think that pressure has definitely impacted people.
It always amazes me, Mel and Dom, that the people who would benefit most from unions often are the ones who don't advocate unions, and I can't see the use of the protection of unions, Dom.
Look, I fully support unions. I mean, before I became the editor of a newspaper, I was a member of the NUJ. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. But what I want to ask Mel is, which part of the system is broken? I mean, because we do seem to be increasingly, I'm sorry, but a sick note society. I mean, you know, if you're genuinely ill, as I keep saying, obviously you need time off, absolutely. But there's a reason that 25% of all sickness phone-ins happen on a Monday.
Yeah.
Now, how many of them are genuine? Come on. So which part of the system, Mel, is broken?
I think people don't want to work for employees that don't value them anymore. I think people are tired of kind of working in toxic workplace cultures, and so they don't have that same sense of loyalty to their work, perhaps, that we did in previous times. But I also do think people are under a lot of pressure today. And when you look at families with children, for example, you know, both parents are usually required to work now because of the cost of living. And that has changed dramatically in the last 50 years. So you can imagine, you know, both parents often working full-time or even part-time is extremely challenging for a household, particularly under the financial strain that people are under today. I think it has really taken its toll on people, and I think they are experiencing
I hear and I understand what you're saying there, Mel, but there's one big motivation in all of this, and you say people don't want to be chained to their desk, people don't want to do this, that, people are a bit broken. But people need money, people need to work to pay the bills, which is what drags them out the door and to do things that perhaps they don't want to do, Mel.
But I suppose there's a reason why we have sick days included in our contract. It's expected that you'll get sick. People get sick. We're human. And so I think there's just the fact that people are taking them more. I don't think this, particularly generations coming into the workplace, I don't think they see working through being sick as something to be celebrated. So perhaps there was a time where people thought, yeah, I'm a bit under the weather today, I have a cold, whatever it might be, I'll just kind of work through that. I don't think people have that same attitude anymore.
I mean, that just sounds ridiculous to me, if I may interrupt you, and I don't know what Dawn's views are on this, but I mean, there's one thing taking a sick day that you're entitled to when you're actually sick, but for goodness sake, if you've got a cold, pull your socks up, put your big boy pants on and get into work. I don't understand why youngsters think they've got a sniffle and they can't do their job.
They're not sick.
Say that again, Mel.
I was saying it's making the assumption that people are taking sick days because they're not sick. And I think what we also can't measure is when it comes to mental health or poor mental health, I think people are taking more days there. And again, 50 years ago, we didn't have the language to even talk about that. And the idea of taking a sick day because stress is getting on top of you or you're experiencing poor mental health was just not something that was taking place. Whereas I think now people are willing to take that time off for their mental health to try and prevent things like getting seriously unwell or experiencing burnout in the long run.
Just going to say, Mel, Isabel's right there, because this rise in statistics of people taking sick days isn't driven by mental health, it is driven by a rise in minor illnesses. So Isabel does have a point that people are developing a sniffle, and whereas we would have, as Isabel said, manned up, I know we can't use that phrase anymore, but we would have manned up, rolled up our sleeves and got on with it. I mean, duvet days, I mean, my grandparents wouldn't have taken a duvet day, they couldn't afford to take duvet days.
No. OK, Mel, got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Dawn, thank you very much indeed. No, I do have to say, Dawn, I mean, I would sum you up as... No, I think there are there are people in life who are susceptible, there are people in life who are victims, whatever. You are completely different because even in your down days, your days off, you're working. As in, and I don't mean, I mean, you're working on yourself, grooming yourself, the way you dress, the things you do, the activities that you do. So do you think you're exceptional?
I think you're exceptional.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Mutual love in here. I don't think I'm exceptional, Eamonn, no. But I do think that we are losing the work ethic in this country. And I think, I mean, you know, as I keep saying, if you are sick, you take that time off. But it is, the rise in long-term sicknesses is rising fast amongst the younger generation.
OK, lovely, OK.
Eat a bag of cement and toughen up.
What she said.
OK, is that the Generation Z? Is that?
Well, that's what they need to do,
Yeah, OK.
Z in England.
Look, stay with us. We're talking about doctors warning the public against buying illegal weight loss drugs, OK? Going through the papers, Freddie Gray, Emma Burnell, next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell, they join us now to go through the newspapers, and we welcome them
Yeah,
both.
sure, I'll be here.
Freddie, we want to talk about police, first of all. This is a big headline in the Express, and it screams out, Suella, I'll put more police boots on the ground. She set her target of there were to be 20,000 new officers. How did she do with that yesterday?
I think they've pretty much made it. They're certainly claiming that they've made it, and she's written a piece for the Express saying, you know, we've done it. But she says there's more to do, more boots on the ground in future. And what she means by that is getting a lot of the paperwork out the way so that policemen can spend their time policing rather than dealing with bureaucracy, and removing some of the sort of institutional failures that have blighted the police in recent years. What's going on here is clearly that Labour are trying to steal a march on the Tories on law and order. They've started talking about law and order a lot. And the Tories want to make sure that it's not a weak point for them.
Well, where the Conservatives look silly on this, and Labour very wise from this, what a good opposition should do is to hold their feet to the fire on this one and make them do something about it. These cuts in the police force were carried out under Conservative governments, and I suppose they're simply trying to redress the balance, whether that's even close, but they're all the same. They all talk about more boots on the ground. I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, also, are they rushing it through? Are the appropriate checks being done? That's my worry. You know, we know how the vetting is pretty lax in the wake of everything that we've seen, particularly with the Met in London. These have to be really special people to be a police officer.
There's a series on BBC One at the minute called Blue Lights, and it's about probationary police officers, and it's set in Belfast, so it is. And when you look at it, you think, why would anybody want to do that job?
Do you think you could do it?
It's tough.
Yes.
I think I could do it.
I reckon I could do it.
I think I could do it.
Do I not exude the natural authority of
the machismo?
Yeah.
I would want 2 tasers at least.
Yes.
You know, I'd want something.
Happy Valley style. I definitely got a Happy Valley, you know.
We have a street party on our street in London, and the sort of local policeman always comes in and checks in. And I was struck a couple of years ago, actually it was pre-pandemic, when my children were, or my sons were absolutely fascinated by him, and he was very engaging, and he sort of showed them his handcuffs and stuff.
Yeah.
And they loved it. And I thought that was quite a nice sort of moment where you think, actually, you can see why people might want to be a policeman, because it's an interesting job, obviously a very challenging.
Oh, full of admiration that they do everyone else's dirty work, particularly politicians. You know, to knock on a door and not know how you're going to be greeted at the other end, I think is pretty scary. To be on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday night and being surrounded by drunks.
That's the one I always think of. Yeah. Pubs in a rural town.
That
on a
must be
Friday
quite
night.
entertaining, though. That's probably one of the funniest sides to it all. The
What?
hardest side to it must be going to domestic abuse call-outs and children being abused. Just seeing, there's probably some quite comical situations that people get themselves into.
I don't think I'd want
influence.
to be
But I do
confronting
think you go
5-year-olds on a Friday
you're right.
night.
But children being sort of in awe of police officers, it just harks back to that really, very fundamental good versus the goodies and the baddies. And the police are the goodies, fundamentally, aren't they? Chasing down the baddies. And that's should be the most celebrated thing.
One absolutely hopes so. And unfortunately, we've seen far too many stories recently. And I come back to your point, Isabel, where, great that you're upping the numbers. Labour have a point, as Eamonn said, that they have just replaced what had been already cut. The Police Federation is saying that actually, in real terms, because our population has increased, per capita we still have fewer police officers than we had in 2010. But there is a fundamental point that we do need to have a conversation about how police behave and if these recruitments are being trained in the right way, are they being taken from the right groups of people, are we attracting the right kinds of people to join the police force, the kind of police who would be great community officers like the ones at Freddie's party.
Yeah, but they've also got to do the dirty work. They've also got to use a baton as well.
And have the strength of character and will to stand up at a pub on a Friday night and when called to a domestic abuse situation.
It wasn't my party, to be clear. It was, I don't have police at my parties.
Emma, let's talk about weight loss drugs. There's a lot of talk in the papers at the moment, particularly for drugs that were primarily designed to combat diabetes, now being used by the rich and the famous to lose weight. This is in the eye.
Yes, so what's happening is the rich and the famous have gone on various platforms and said, hey, I've lost all this weight and I look great and it's because of this wonder drug. And of course, what happens, they aren't being paid to advertise these. It's not like a L'Oreal commercial where they're worth it. This is, them saying this is the thing that I've used. But of course, that then does influence people who want to lose weight themselves. And I'm sure I can understand that impulse. I've still got 2 stone, 4 pounds to go before I hit my target weight.
You look amazing.
Thank you. I always ask for that, fishing for compliments there.
Always happy to give them.
The problem is that these drugs are regulated when given to diabetics or people with serious obesity. They are not regulated when people are buying them off the black market on the internet, and there are real dangers of just taking something unregulated without a doctor's involvement, and there are real worries that people are going to cause themselves very real harm in order to look and feel better. And people who are buying this off the internet are almost certainly not the people who are going to really need a weight loss drug, because that's what the NHS is for. It's people who are, tempted to lose more weight than perhaps they should, or, who are a few pounds overweight but not in any serious physical and health danger.
OK. Should we talk about Prince Andrew's disastrous interview? Because it's just fun to go over it again, isn't it? Apparently the Queen knew it was a disaster. She didn't like doing interviews, well, she never did them. But what's the latest
the funniest
take on
part
this?
about this story is that Prince Andrew thought that famous car crash interview went really well. Yeah. He was apparently very jolly afterwards and thought he'd really sort of put all his problems to bed. And then a few hours before the broadcast, the Queen was given a transcript of the interview. She read it and immediately called a meeting with Andrew saying,
what have you done?
What have you done? You disaster. But there's a documentary coming up about the problem prince, and it will be rather interesting to watch, because I think it does go down as, you guys have done a lot of interviews, it goes down as the best car crash interview I've ever seen, or the worst car crash interview I've ever seen. And I just love that straightforward shooting weekend line. That's my favourite of the horror quotes.
Remind us the horror quote.
He was asked about this shooting weekend, and he just said, just a straightforward shooting weekend.
As we all do.
As we all do.
What did he say,
a straightforward shooting weekend. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Imagine your mum calling you to a meeting. I mean, we've all had occasions where your mum's a bit disappointed and you say, would you like a cup of tea, darling? But come to a meeting. You know you're in trouble then. And the Queen was so media savvy. Yeah, that's why she didn't do interviews. She knew that there were far too many traps available. That Andrew not only didn't know not to do the interview, but walked out of that interview thinking, oh, that went well.
Yeah.
You just have to wonder where his brain is.
But he's creeping back in. I mean, he's got a prominent role in the Coronation. He'll be there, won't
Has he?
Well, I mean, he's there.
He's there.
He's in the top seats.
Yeah.
And people will find that offensive.
He's finished.
I mean, given that Prince Harry seems to be
I don't think he's
more-
creeping back in.
You don't?
No.
I mean, I do think it is slightly weird that Harry gets more criticism than Andrew, frankly. I mean, Harry, you can like him or hate him.
Yeah, but Harry goes looking for it. That's it. He sticks his nose in where it's not wanted.
That may well be the case, but he... yeah, exactly. That in terms of what they've actually done...
Yeah.
Andrew is considerably a worse public figure. Yeah, and Harry has some views that people find annoying. Andrew has, had to settle out of a court case.
Your
where...
use of the word creeping, I think, was telling you. He's
creeping
back in. Yeah.
Officially a creep.
Guys, thank you. You can creep back in at 8:30 this morning. We'll see you again, Freddie and Emma. Thank you very much indeed. 9 minutes now before 8 o'clock.
Let's bring you up to date with today's top stories. And schools in England are facing disruption as tens of thousands of teachers are going on strike. National Education Union members are walking out in a dispute over pay. More strikes have also been announced for the summer term after members turned down the government's pay offer.
British forces are racing to evacuate as many people out of Sudan as possible. Before the ceasefire ends tonight, 536 people have been flown to safety on 6 separate flights so far.
A YouGov poll has found that almost 3/4 of people in Scotland do not care about the upcoming coronation. Their research found that only 6% care a great deal and less than half think Britain should continue to have a monarchy.
Oh, this is very interesting.
From one queen to another.
Very good, very
Thank you.
good. Freddie Mercury was the legendary frontman of rock band Queen. He lost his battle with AIDS in 1991.
But now fans of the singer can get their hands on some of Freddie's private and most prized possessions as they go under the hammer at London auction house Sotheby's. And Ellie Phillips has more details of what is up for grabs. I believe the entire Sotheby's auction house is going to be filled, so much so is the contents of his house.
1,500 pieces. This is incredible. It's the biggest exhibition they've ever had at Sotheby's.
So it's not an auction?
So it will be an auction. So what they're going to do is they're going to put the pieces on display first for free. People can go and see it. It's going to be from the 4th of August till the 5th of September, which would have been his 77th birthday. They're going to put all the items on display so people can go and have a look and see. And they're actually going to take them around the world. So it's going to start out with highlights going to New York, then LA, then Hong Kong, and then London for the month. Then they're going to go on auction.
Right, so when you talk about things for auction, are these gold discs, are these statuettes, or what are they?
This is amazing. So what happened was, when he died, he left his house in London, in Kensington, to Mary Austin, who's his former fiancée and then lifelong friend. The contents of the house, all left her with his fortune, and she has lived there ever since, over 30 years, and she's not touched anything. So it's all remained there. And what she said is that she's 72 now. She wants to get her affairs in order, and so she wants.
So we're looking at an old lamp there at the minute. Right, so basically, I'm looking at this rock god, this iconic figure, and I'm supposed to say, I like the frills round his...
that's his moustache comb
Exactly. So it's a mix of everything. So there's personal items and artefacts and also iconic pieces as well. So, for example, some of the things, handwritten lyrics to We Are the Champions, that's going to go on sale, and that's got an estimate of £300,000. I think these estimates are far too low, if I'm honest. One of the other things which is going to do really well is the crown, which is a replica of St Edward's crown that he wore for Queen's final ever performance on stage back in 1986. That's got an estimate of £80,000. Again, I think really way too low for these iconic memorabilia. And then there's also the artwork that he collected. So you've got 11 watercolours by Urte, a portrait by Tissot, paintings by Henri Matisse and Pablo Picasso. So it's this whole mix of kind of music, iconic things. We saw there that we had his Tiffany comb, the silver comb that he used to groom his moustache, and also his acoustic guitar that he used to write and record Crazy Little Thing Called Love. So it is a mix of kind of iconic music memorabilia and just artefacts that he collected himself. And it's quite sweet, this one. It's been kind of dubbed the special things that are going to go on sale, his splendid things, because he once said, I like to be surrounded by splendid things. I want to lead a Victorian life surrounded by splendid clutter. So this is his splendid clutter. It's been untouched for 1,000 years. But there's 1,500 pieces of this going up. And it's just amazing. I think that fans will get to go and see it first before then it gets put up for auction. And a lot of the proceeds are going to go to his AIDS Foundation and to Elton John's AIDS Foundation.
It helps give you an insight into who the man was and what he did when he wasn't on stage.
Oh yeah, he was obsessed. He loved to collect all these different things, artwork. And Mary herself said, you know, he created all of these things. He curated it, if you will, sought out these pieces and loved to see them. And his costumes that are going to go on sale, he actually had in the house in a mirrored room and had them on display.
Have you seen Bohemian Rhapsody? Yes. I mean, I'm just imagining it all. It's such a colourful character, such a lovable character, such amazing music. I'd quite like to go, I think.
I am
have a little
desperate to go and see this. And in fact, the head of Sotheby's has said that when they went round, it took them months to go round and pick all these pieces out. It was like opening a Russian doll. There was so much in there.
I love that analogy.
Ellie, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll bring you more on today's teacher strikes. Walkouts force schools to shut right across England.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News, we're starting the conversation and having the debate that the establishment won't have.
No one will be cancelled.
Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Schools face mass disruption as tens of thousands of teachers stage fresh walkouts.
A very good morning. Welcome to the programme. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 27th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Thanks for your company, wherever you're watching or listening. Leading the news this morning. Schools in England face closures today as teachers hold mass strikes. All major education unions have rejected the government's offer of a 4.3% pay rise, with the NEU branding it insulting.
This morning, the Health Secretary will bring a legal challenge against a proposed 48-hour nurses' strike that starts on Sunday. The leader of the Royal College of Nursing has accused Steve Barclay of treating healthcare workers like criminals.
The illegal migration bill has passed through the House of Commons despite criticism from some Conservative MPs. The bill is expected to run into more opposition when it faces the House of Lords, where it could be heavily amended.
Evacuation flights from Sudan could continue after the end of the ceasefire tonight, according to the army officer in charge of the operation. So far, over 500 British nationals have been rescued.
A diplomatic storm is brewing after it was revealed that the architect of China's crackdown on Hong Kong will attend the King's coronation. Politicians have reacted with fury, calling his attendance an insult.
And we're asking you to vote for the Trick Awards.
This is the really big
if you
news.
want to vote for GB News Breakfast, I mean, I don't know why we're asking when you want to vote.
Who moved that tie?
You.
It's gone again. Did I?
It must be when you turn. But don't interrupt. I'm trying to get people to vote for us. If you want to vote for GB News Breakfast, which I would say when you want to vote for GB News Breakfast as the best multi-channel news programme, you just have to
What
go...
are we, the best what?
Multi-channel news programme. Something or other. Trick.org.uk is where you need to go, and you can also vote for Eamonn as best news presenter. Of course, he won it last year, so it would only be keeping him in his correct
Stop embarrassing me, the position which I'm entitled to. tric.org.uk /public poll. Look, log on that. We are joking, but it would mean an awful lot. I mean, Isabel knows how much I sit at night saying,
Please
wouldn't
God.
it be nice? Please God, wouldn't we, if I was to win that? And it's not that it's...
Here we go.
Well, the mantle has been put on my shoulders.
Yeah, the pressure.
To represent, it's not you that's been nominated, it's
No.
me that's been nominated.
Which is
so I have all that pressure of doing... I don't know why they wouldn't have nominated you.
Well, I know.
I've no idea, but you just, they just... That's the way it is.
That's the way it is.
That's the way it is, But
Anyway, I'm just chopped liver. Let's play this
What does
sting.
that mean, chopped liver?
I don't know.
See, you're picking up my bad habits now too. Let's play
the
the sting. Top story on this Thursday morning. Tens of thousands of teachers in England will walk out today after members of the National Education Union rejected the government's pay offer. They called it insulting.
All major teaching unions have rejected the 4.3% wage rise, warning the disruption will get worse unless a deal is reached.
Now, this follows the closure of most schools in Northern Ireland yesterday, but in Scotland, teachers have suspended strike action. The unions there urging members to accept the offer made to them of a 12% pay increase.
Well, earlier we spoke to a former advisor to the Education Secretary, Mark Lehane, who told us strikes aren't the best way to solve pay disputes.
What the National Education Union and other unions will tell you is that since 2010, the real value of the pay that teachers get has been eroded by inflation. Although there have been pay rises since then, the pay rises haven't kept pace with the cost of living increases since then. And they've got a point. However, what people like myself and probably you, Isabel, listening to what you said this morning, would argue is that even though pay has come down for teachers, the strikes are not necessarily the best way to resolve that issue. As you said, these are the first strikes we've had since all of the teaching unions, there's 4 main ones, since all 4 unions rejected the government's offer, which actually was pretty generous. It offered all teachers currently in the job a £1,000 bonus for this year and up to 4.5% increase for next year. But that was rejected. That offer has been taken off the table now, and we won't know what they're recommending, or even the government won't know what the recommendations from that independent pay body will be for about another month. So the question as to what we do between now and then.
And it could be a worse offer, couldn't it? And in fact, that offer that was given to teachers has been taken off the table by the government. Let's go to our Yorkshire and Humber reporter.
You take it off, I'll have to put it back on again. So Anna Riley there. Hello, Anna. Anna's on a picket line in Driffield. So tell us about Driffield. Where is Driffield, and what's the turnout like there, Anna?
Good morning. Yes, Driffield's in East Yorkshire. It's a secondary school and sixth form as well. It's majority closed today. It's just open to year 11s up to year 13, so they can come in and do some revision preparation for those exams, but the rest of the school is shut from years 7 to 10. There's a fair turnout here at the picket line. I'd say there's around 10 teachers that have come out to strike. You can hear them whistling in the background. They've got the flags as well, and it's all about pay, and they've said it's about conditions as well. They want that pay rise in line with inflation and the rising cost of living, and they also want that pay rise not to come out of the school's budget. Well, I spoke to Steve Scott earlier. He's the East Riding NEU Joint Secretary, and this is what he had to say.
Teachers are out on strike today for a fully funded pay rise in order to save education. So the government have made us an offer. However, that offer was still unfunded, which for many teachers was not enough. They're in the classrooms day in, day out. They're seeing what impact this underfunding of education is having. Parents know that what we're doing is right, and they know that we're fighting for their children. They know that teachers and support staff don't want to be out on strike, but they know that it is our last resort because the government aren't giving us a serious offer. Therefore, teachers have taken the hard decision to come out on strike to ensure that any offer that is made is fully funded by the government, not school budgets.
Steve there saying that he believes that there is the public support still for these strikes. It's the 4th day of national strike action with these teacher strikes, and there's more planned for Tuesday in England.
What I love about what you're doing this morning is that it shows that these strikes, that it affects the whole country. It goes to places like, I'd never heard of Driffield before, but looking at it, I want to go to it. It looks really, really nice. And how would you describe the school? Is it a big school, small school, village school?
It's a fairly big school because it's got the sixth form added to it as well. So there's more than 100 children that come to school here. And Driffield's a fairly rural area, you know, so it is one of the big schools in the region. So people will be impacted by the strike action today. It's obviously children that are needing to learn, but also parents as well, trying to find cover if they're having to look after the children today when they can't come to school.
Yeah,
but certainly come to Driffield. It is a lovely place.
It certainly looks
Anna.
it.
Thanks for bringing it to us and showing where the strike is extending to. It's fascinating, Anna saying there that it's a fairly big school, 100 pupils.
It doesn't sound big. No, I just thought that sounds like a normal sixth form, let alone, and there's 600 kids in my children's primary school, but maybe she's got that wrong. I don't know.
No, but I would say from memory, I think there were nearly 2,000 pupils in my school. Now, I may have got that wrong. It may have been 1,000, but I'd have to sit and count up, you know,
how many in a
years,
class
the
and how many forms in a year?
Well, I remember at primary school, there were 42 people in my class.
No.
42 people, one teacher.
Gosh,
right?
we think 30 is a lot in our class, and they sit on the floor and they're unruly.
And you know, that shows you what teachers have got to deal with there. But when it went to grammar school, obviously it was the numbers were better, but I have huge respect.
Well, when you say that, what were the numbers at your grammar school? I'm interested. What, 18, 20?
I don't really know. I remember, like, I could almost recite the roll book at primary school.
With your register.
Who was in your class. I mean, I sat beside, it was all alphabetical order, and there was Eamonn Han, H-A-N-N before me, and then there was Eamonn Holmes. And then there was Paul Leonard.
I was W. I was always at the end of the register. It was so annoying. I was thrilled when I changed my name.
Well, when I went to grammar school, obviously there were so many different forms, so many different years, the lower school, the upper school, whatever. And I just have huge respect for teachers and administrators who had to keep all of that together. So let's not underestimate
I do think it's a really important point, class sizes, because, you know, we know there are better outcomes when you have smaller class sizes. You see it a lot in the private sector. But when there is more pressure on teaching staff, and if more people are leaving the profession, you only are going to end up with bigger class sizes, which has worse outcomes in terms of results.
Our class of 42, I think there was 8 of us past the 11 plus. So that meant, you know, there was such a large number who didn't. To the future who was decided at
11. Unbelievable.
Tom Harwood, our deputy political editor, joined us now in the studio to talk about this and where we think this strike is going.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. This is not the only day of strike action that is taking place. There are 2 days announced, first today and then one a little bit in early May. But this is a really crucial point for the government because, of course, it's happening in England and Northern Ireland, but in Scotland and Wales there have been pay offers that have been accepted. And they're not...
No wonder they're accepted, because they're what, 14%? So we're talking.
Well, that's across 3 years.
Right.
So the interesting thing about the Scotland offer is that there was a 7% increase last year, and then there's a 5% increase from this April. So that's adding those two together. Whereas in the UK, or in England more specifically, there was an increase of 5% in 2022. There's a pay offer of £1,000 lump sum for this year, and then a 4.3% rise next year. So it's a different way of doing it. But the thing that the government is saying today is that because this strike action is going ahead, because this pay offer has been rejected, that £1,000 lump sum is being dropped because the pay review bodies only look into next year's pay rather than backdating, because the government says now the process passes on to that pay review body rather than the negotiations that we've seen. I think it's also important to note in this conversation that it's not the 4.3% that all teachers would be getting. Those who are starting to be teachers in England, those at the beginning of their careers, would be getting an over 7% pay rise. So there is a sort of different graduation in terms of those who are more junior and those who are more senior.
Yeah, and I suppose it applies with the whole nursing row with the health secretary as well, is that actually if they leave it much longer in the year, with everybody expecting inflation to be reduced, that plays into the hands of the government's negotiations. You've now seen this bonus being taken off the table by the Education Secretary. The unions need to be mindful of that in all of this, don't they? I mean, we know that there's this strike happening next Tuesday in schools, but they've also announced 3 more strike days in the autumn term, the date's TBC. You know, it's very volatile, the situation across the unions, isn't it?
It is very volatile, and I think it's also worth comparing what's been offered in England to what's been offered in Wales, which is actually a lot closer. In Wales, there was 3% for this academic year and 5% for next academic year. That was accepted, a below-inflation pay rise that was accepted by the unions in Wales. So there is a bit of difference here. One of the big concerns is a disagreement between the government and the unions in England in terms of where this money is coming from. The government injected £2.3 billion extra into schools at the start of this term, and they say that extra cash can pay for these, some of it's for energy and some of it can pay for this pay increase that they've offered. The unions are saying, however, that this is technically their existing budget. So there's a real semantic difference there that seems to be a sticking point.
Meanwhile, mentioning the Health Secretary there and his row with the nurses, he's taking them to court. And yet the civil servants now accusing him of bullying. So it's been a bad week for Steve Barclay.
It certainly has. And I think that this is one of the things that, that the former Deputy Prime Minister warned against, that potentially civil servants would now see this route to kicking back against their ministers. And the worry was this sort of domino effect that politicised elements within the civil service might well see a route to sort of getting one up above their minister. That being said, we don't know the full details of what's being alleged against the Health Secretary, and that is a matter that no doubt will be being investigated.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Let's turn our attention now to Sudan, and evacuation flights from there could continue after the end of the ceasefire. The end of the ceasefire is scheduled for midnight tonight, according to the army officer in charge of the operation.
The Foreign Secretary has warned the government can't guarantee how many flights will be able to depart after that deadline has passed. So far, over 500 British nationals have been safely rescued from the conflict zone.
Well, let's speak now to former commander of 1st Parachute Regiment who led the evacuation from Sierra Leone. We're going back 23 years there. That is Brigadier Paul Gibson. Brigadier, good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn.
Good. Does this bring back memories of that time and difficulties? I mean, under such a stressful conditions, to be able to do what's expected of you. It must be a very, very difficult operation to mount.
I think they are tricky. I think you're very reliant on good intelligence, which we had. You need some good, quick decision-making in Whitehall to commit assets. We, within 24 hours, moved one para, we moved C-130s, and we moved Chinook helicopters down to Senegal, poised, ready to go into Sierra Leone. And we had an excellent High Commissioner who had a really good handle on where the Brits and other entitled personnel were living in Freetown. He had a really good contingency plan. He himself was very brave and stayed throughout the operation. We gave him some protection, and we were able to move people out, several hundred, really quite quickly. But I think, Eamonn,
you're highlighting a few things there that are sadly amiss with what's going on in Sudan. I have to say that's obvious right from the start. But there is the Foreign Secretary yesterday couldn't really commit to whether tonight would be the last operation of taking people out of the airport or not. And I think understandably so, if you can't guarantee the security there. Who's going to actually say, we'll send those big troop carriers in again? Because they must be very easy targets.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you raised that, Eamonn. I'm not making a direct comparison between the two operations. Khartoum is much bigger. The number of people we're trying to get out is greater. And I think we know Sudan less well than we did Sierra Leone. So you're right. There's now a huge risk about getting people from Khartoum out to the airfield. And that is a great concern. And I understand fully why the early advice was to stay put. And I think you'll now see huge diplomatic pressure from the Americans, particularly, to try and extend this ceasefire. Because without a ceasefire in place, moving people out is going to be very difficult. And as you suggested, you start putting people in, they themselves will become a target and get caught up in the crossfire.
Yeah, and that will be a diplomatic process, I suppose, between Saudi and the Americans who've been working on this ceasefire thus far. Could I ask you from a sort of military perspective what it's like, and maybe you haven't had to do this, but for those people, I think there's 170 or something like that British personnel on the ground protecting particularly the airstrip where the evacuations are taking place. And we're told that once Brits get there, they're pretty safe, to be honest, but it's the problems of actually getting there is where British people are having problems. But what is it like from a personnel point of view if you have to go wheels up and simply say to British citizens, I'm afraid we simply cannot help you. That's the direction from Whitehall. We're leaving now. I mean, that must be an awful thing for personnel to have to do.
Horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. And no, I haven't had to do that because when we were in Sierra Leone, frankly, the paperwork was pretty minimal. If people were in harm's way, we put them in the back of a helicopter and got them out of there. I think it's become much more complex now. Much more concerns about people having the appropriate paperwork and visas, and that's slowing things down. We saw that in Kabul, didn't we? And so heartbreaking to leave people behind, absolutely heartbreaking, and no British soldier would wish to do that.
No, I'm sure.
Well, it's fascinating to get your take and your expertise on what's happening here in Sudan compared to what you were doing in Sierra Leone. And you say you're not really comparing like with like. How would you see, if you were to look into your crystal ball or you were to offer advice, Brigadier, what would that be? What do you think is the most important thing that the British government could be doing from here on in?
I think they've got to stay poised for further recovery. So all the links to Cyprus, the security at the airport, keep all of that in place. Have all the assets primed so that if there is an opportunity to go and pick somebody up, you can do so. Have a huge amount of diplomatic pressure going on here. Increase your intelligence, get a better handle on where these people are, what their circumstances are, and you'll have to start to work individual cases as best you can. Highly complex, not an easy task at all.
Sorry, just really quickly, I know we're almost out of time, but I just want to ask, and I know you'll be reluctant to criticise, but do you think we were slow to react to intelligence, and do you think we should have been bolder in the early stages?
I think the sense is that a debrief after this operation might well indicate that we didn't make some really big calls early on, and we're having to play catch-up.
Okay.
It's a career in the diplomatic service you should be looking for now. Brigadier, thank you. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Okay.
It's 8:20. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
More than 400 workers from His Majesty's Revenue and Customs will take industrial action in May and June. PCS members will strike for 18 days over the 2 months amid a dispute over pay, pensions, jobs and redundancy. The union says the government has until later today to make a fair offer to stop those strikes.
Labour claims the government's abandoning first-time buyers. It comes as the English Housing Survey shows that only a third of children born this year in England will ever have the ability to own a home by the time they reach 50. Labour's promising to get more homes built and actively support first-time buyers.
There you go. That's not her. That's not real. That's a waxwork of the Queen Consort, unveiled at Madame Tussauds ahead of the coronation. The figure is styled in a dark blue gown next to King Charles in the throne. And now we see, why are we concentrating on the Camilla statue and not him?
Maybe it's the first one of her. Perhaps there have been many of him. I'm not sure.
Well, maybe they don't think his is that good.
To know.
Maybe not. But they look great, don't they?
They do.
They're very, very good.
They're very small people, aren't they? They're not particularly tall. If you look at Wills and Kate tower over King Charles.
Oh.
Yeah.
OK.
Lots of people getting in touch about class sizes. This one's from Christine Smith. I think it's interesting. In our junior school, there were 52 children, and one teacher stood before class and pupils sat at desks in twos. There were 3 streams in each year. We were well educated. There was strict discipline, and at grammar school, there were 32 pupils and the same discipline applied. We did differential calculus for O-level. The teachers were better in those days, probably due to better mannered children allowing to teach. I think that's probably true. I think children were better behaved a generation ago.
But you know why we were better behaved? Because they had straps. They had or rulers or whatever, and literally
corporate punishment.
And you had to be
corporal. Which is it?
Corporate.
Not corporate.
It's not, yeah, it is corporal. Corporal punishment.
Not corporate. That happens in offices.
Nor indeed is it capital punishment,
No.
which is results in you being.
I'm not
dead.
advocating that we bring back spanking.
No, but I'm saying it's interesting that it did apply there, and often you would sit and for the most menial thing, you would be disciplined for, and you had to hold out your hand, and there were all sorts of tricks to deflect the strap on your hand. You rubbed your hand on your leg to make it warmer for some reason, I don't know. Some people would put chalk dust on their hand as well so that the strap would slip off. But it wasn't a nice thing. And now, when you think about it, if it was to happen to anyone, look at your beautiful babies.
My goodness, I know.
You know,
Don't
that
want to
somebody
touch
would
my
take them
children.
and physically strike them.
I know, awful. But now it's the other way around. Teachers are afraid of the kids. Not my kids. But, you know, we hear about it all the time in class. You say good
afraid of
morning.
your
No,
kids.
you're not.
They sort of eat raw meat and things, don't they? They're sort of strange little ones. They are.
Right, careful, I'm going to cry.
Especially that girl, especially that poppy one. OK, we were with sport last night. Hey, goodness me. Did you watch any of the match last night? Did you stay up?
Oh, yeah, I was up all night watching
I was just
that.
wondering, would you have? No, did you? I stayed to the first goal and then left after that. But what a win for Manchester
I was
City.
more interested in the Gareth Bale news line yesterday.
What was that?
Well, obviously this ongoing Wrexham story. Now they're trying to drag
it
Gareth
with him.
Bale out of retirement because obviously he's a Welsh icon when it comes to football. That was more my...
See, that could disrupt the dynamic because they're bringing in a Galactico then, a big star and big money.
Yeah, but that's what they want.
And then it's not just about the team anymore.
Yes, it is. He's just going to spread his magic. Oh. Come on, Gareth.
OK, Aidan McGee spreading his magic with the sports news next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin,
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:27. Still to come on the programme this morning.
Ever wonder what the king gets up to behind the scenes?
Sometimes it's a bit cheeky.
Well, yes, well, it's very cheeky we've got that picture. But anyway, we'll speak to photographer Alison Jackson. She reveals the royal family as you have never seen them before.
And as communities across the country come together for the Coronation's big lunch next week, we'll be asking Bake Off finalist Ali Fevronia what you can whip up to dazzle your neighbours.
OK. And, you know, if you've any recipes to share with us or what you think of that...
Coronation
quiche coronation quiche.
You say that with such... What you think of that. You can just tell. Your face paints a picture of...
You know, I do like, you know, those buns they make in Portugal. Custard, but I don't know what they're called. But they're lovely. They're lovely.
What's that got to do with anything? Oh, eggy pastry.
You know, my teacher at primary school used to send me eggy pastry things.
Charlie, what are those pastries from Portugal called? Oh, he's not
Custard
in there.
creams. No. They're called a natter.
No. There's a little shop on the... I can picture it. It's named it on Beach and Place on the corner. I've got to look
One
it
of
up.
the jobs you used to get if you were very good at primary school was that the teacher would send you round to the bakery to get his lunch. So you get him a sausage roll and a custard cream.
Oh, that sounds the life.
So it was great. So it would take you at least 10 minutes to get there, 5 minutes to queue
You
up,
get
10
one
minutes
whilst
back.
you're there.
So there's half an hour you wasted at school for the day.
I can't believe they let you
And that
into
was a
grammar
reward.
school.
That was a reward. That was brilliant. So let us have your pictures of buns and
I'm going to look that up while you do the
Custard
sport.
tarts.
I'm going to look it up.
Okay.
Charlie's wrong for once.
Back after this. Back pages, got Aidan
Vanilla
McGee
Crown?
standing by. What?
Not Vanilla Crown, is it?
No, it's not.
All right.
You stick to the sport. You stick with a vanilla crown.
Thank you, sir.
No, it's not. It's a Portuguese. What's the one in Portuguese? Because I went to Lisbon and I went to a bakery where they made all these things.
The Cafe de Nata is where I go, but I can't... OK, a nata. Nata?
It's not called a nata.
OK, I just didn't understand the way they were said.
Oh, it is?
A nata.
How do you spell that?
N-A-T-A. But anyway, I can't show you on here. I don't know how to show you a picture of one of these.
Yeah, but that's,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
All right, sorry.
But not Vanilla Crown.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Right, the big match last night. Mirror, let's look at that back page first of all. They think it's Hall over. Look at his hair let down. Wow. So Manchester City taking control of the title race. They outclassed Arsenal last night 4-1 at the Etihad. Simply the best, says the Mail. Kevin De Bruyne, peerless as he ran the show in that title decider. And the Metro, the race for the top four continues today as a demoralised Tottenham take on the mighty Man U, with the paper calling it the Hunger Games after Ten Hag, the Manchester United manager, says his players have to want it more. Well, of course they do. Aidan McGee is with us now. Looking back last night, what's your reading? So, OK, you've got City 2 points behind, 2 games in hand now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, it was men against boys last night, I have to say. I mean, for somebody who likes their sport and wants to see competition, I didn't enjoy it from that point of view. I thought it was a vintage performance by Manchester City, but they just looked so much stronger than Arsenal. Now, I'm not going to suggest Arsenal lacked bottle. It would be hugely disrespectful given the season they had, but I do think, Eamonn, they lacked a little bit of belief. There were chances in the first half where they were out, had wide positions. They should have got the ball in the box. They'd committed men forward, but for some reason they found themselves squeezed and suffocated. They couldn't get the ball into the box. There were other times when they got into the box and when it was censored, no one took a gamble. That's a lack of belief. Now,
It's also a lack of experience, my friend, isn't it?
Well, it is, yes.
You could look at it now and you could say City have been there, done it, got the T-shirt, and your money could be on them. I, though, do think that Arsenal have the points on the board.
They do, but they're only 2. I mean, City don't lose title races. 2012, Man United, they beat them on the last day when they beat QPR.
That wasn't a real win. That was ridiculous.
QPR's defending was
one
quite
of the
bad.
saddest days of my life, that was.
Well, QPR stayed up, so I wasn't too unhappy. But no, 2014, they went up against Liverpool. 2019 went up against Liverpool and prevailed. 2022, they don't lose title races. They've got experienced they've got an experienced manager. Most of those players, the squad hasn't massively changed over the last 2 or 3 years, so they've been there and done it. Arsenal haven't been in a title race since 2008. Not one player is surviving from that era. So it's all new to them. I suppose you could say that Zinchenko's in there, Gabriel Jesus. Yes, OK, they're experienced players. They won it at Manchester City last year, of course. But I just think it was a lack of belief and it was a vintage performance by Manchester City. And they did it with the old-school tactics, really. But as soon as the Arsenal press came forward, they decided to hit the ball long in some ways. And then they had the runners from midfield and they weren't picked up at all. De Bruyne was absolutely outstanding. I mean, people talking about being peerless this morning. But 4-1, that's 3 times they've beaten Arsenal this season. I think it's absolutely theirs to lose. They'll win their games in hand. Arsenal's run-in looks tougher than Manchester City's, even though City have got 2 games more to play. It's done.
Folks, Aidan says it's done. What do you think? Let us know your views on all of that. Chelsea, meanwhile, are they done? Frank Lampard has been there in charge for 5 games. They've played 5 games under Frank, and they've won
0, and they've scored 1 goal. They didn't even start with a striker last night. They had Conor Gallagher and Raheem Sterling kind of alternating between the front position and the left side. They posed no threat whatsoever to Brentford. Brentford won their 4-2 last season. It was deemed to be an excellent result, but they went
Chelsea
there last night.
Chelsea are at home here.
Exactly, but Brentford didn't arrive in great form. They hadn't won in their last 6 matches, and it looked like quite a comfortable win. Now, Frank Lampard afterwards was saying, yeah, but they only had 1 shot on goal. Well, when you're scoring an own goal, You don't need too many shots on goals.
To go to Stamford Bridge to get 2 goals, to get a away win against Chelsea.
Nobody used to win at Stamford Bridge, did they? Well, nobody. And then so Brentford go there. Look, they had a lot of fans because it's a local derby, and they were comfortable. And look, if they're serious about appointing Mauricio Pochettino and announcing it in the next couple of days, get him in now. Because if you go in there now, Pochettino's got 6 games to them. There's nothing left in this season. It can't end quickly enough. But if Pochettino goes in there now, he has a chance to at least assess that enormous squad and then decide in the summer who needs to go, because they probably need to lose 7 or 8 players. They're also signed... Some of the players they signed in January... I mean, Mudryk, for example, he wasn't known on these shorts. How much did he cost? Yeah. And they spent £600 million some of those players will be surplus to requirements. So get a manager in there now who can use the last 6 games to build a little bit of confidence, get to the summer, and then make those changes ahead of next season.
There's a lot of financial talk as well about Manchester United. A lot of people might say, Manchester United supporters may feel that the Glazers may be surplus to requirements now. But I'll tell you what, the bids and what we're hearing from the financial pages is that, yes, the Glazers are still up for selling, but maybe not all of the club, which is a...
Yeah, I was told this a month ago by somebody in the know that they would like to retain some kind of foothold. Now, to the fans, they would prefer the Qatari bid. I'm absolutely certain of it. They want to buy 100% of the club, and that's when you'll see an era of new spending at Manchester United to help them compete with some of their rivals. But it's not the fans that the bidders have to impress. The Glazers hold all the cards here. They want £6 billion. If you still take over the club and you've got 51%, which is roughly what the Ineos, Sir James Radcliffe would want, then you still have control, and you're still able to assuage the Glazers by keeping them involved at the club. Yeah. But I don't think it's going to go well. You won't get the goodwill from the supporters that the Qatari bid would get. The deadline's tomorrow night at 10 p.m. The Rain Group are in charge of it. We'll see where it goes. But I don't know about you as a fan, but what do you think about...
I can't think. I sit on the board of the foundation, so I can't think. OK. So, listen, the United are playing Spurs tonight in the league. I just want a word about Sheffield United, who join Burnley up in the Premier League.
Good achievement, because a lot of fans don't realise that when you've been out of the Premier League for a second season, that's the one. That's your last chance to really get back in the Premier League. Bournemouth did it last season after 2 years. Paul Heckingbottom wasn't the popular choice necessarily last summer when he was given the job, but goodness me, he's done an excellent job there. They lost to Burnley a couple of weeks ago, but, their form has been very consistent since the start of the season. They did the job last night with a 2-0 win over West Brom. How they'll do next season, it's not the same side as went up in 2019 under Chris Wilder, but why would you have any inferiority complex? Because I have to say, we've seen this season that the bottom 6 and bottom 7 are not great in the Premier League, and so they'll fancy themselves to hold their own once again.
So is there one more place up for grabs then?
Yes, there is in the playoffs, yes. There's Luton, Middlesbrough, Coventry involved in Millwall as well.
Wow. Great. Well done, Sheffield United. Well done, Burnley. See them in the Premier League next year. Chelsea can't be relegated, can they?
They're 9 points above the bottom 3. Yeah. So let's...
5 defeats.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
OK, Aidan, appreciate it. Thank you. Nice to see you, Aidan. We should say Aidan's not normally here during the week. Paul Coyte is, but he was doing lots of work, wasn't he? 4 gigs today. Well for some. Please do stay with us.
Yes, we're going to have the latest on Donald Trump as the former president faces his rape accuser in court. We'll be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell to cover that and the rest of the day's news next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back. It's 8:41. Joining us to go through the papers one last time is the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Mercury, who loves a time check. Yeah, it's straight, I think.
Yeah.
You loved the time checks last week, didn't you,
I
Freddie?
really enjoyed the time checks.
Yeah. And we're also joined by the political consultant and journalist, Emma Burnell.
Am I going to present next week? Is that
Maybe.
is that the deal?
If I don't turn up, we'll see how I feel. Well, it's Buckingham Palace next week.
Did you do it like it was 8:41 or it was 19 minutes to 9? Did you?
I did. I just read it very literally because I was.
You just said time check.
I had a whale of a time check.
Right, guys, where are we going to begin here?
I thought we always start with Freddie. So just in the interests of, equality, let's start with Emma. Shark that killed 35-year-old British man in Australia was provoked. What? The victim was the shark?
This is a very interesting story. So apparently, shark attacks are quite rare. And we're all completely misled by having grown up watching Jaws. They're not big predators of humans. But what's happened here is this guy was, and this guy, it wasn't his fault, but he was swimming in an area where they'd previously been fishing. And that had both churned up the water and put a lot of chum into the water, which attracted the shark into a place he wouldn't normally be. And that's why this has been designated as a provoked attack, because the shark was unwittingly brought into a place and then sort of found these thrashing legs unexpectedly in his path.
But why do we care if the shark was innocent or guilty or to blame? I don't really. Poor shark.
Well, I guess it helps us understand what the circumstances are, and I guess
you
how to avoid them.
understand that you're out swimming. There is a shark. You kill it. Right, you just bring it along with a harpoon, or you.
I'm not sure that's what.
Or as they did in Jaws, they put a gas cylinder. Didn't
That's why we care, because if we're saying that the sharks are these evil, terrible predators that we remember, thanks to Steven Spielberg, who apparently regrets us all thinking that now, then we change the policy of how to approach sharks, who are generally not approaching humans.
My wife used to work with sharks, so she's very pro-shark, and she doesn't think they're guilty of anything.
What way did she work with them?
She was doing a project, but part of the project was in was into sharks, but the project was to go down in the cages with great whites.
Yes, oh gosh, yes. No,
and she's got a funny story of once they'd take tourists out who'd pay a lot of money to go, and they took this enormous American man, and he sort of went too soon, and he tilted the cage sideways, and it opened, and they spilled out.
No!
And
it spilt out onto the
So they had to very calmly swim back.
Now that's chum.
With the sharks.
God.
Swimming around.
Oh, my word.
Wow.
But because she's so pro-shark, she thought the shark's not going to hurt me.
So,
And wait, sorry, in that circumstance, did the other people also have to get in the water and put themselves in harm's way to get the very large American back in the cage?
I think it was in South Africa. It was off South Africa, and the South African guys came in because they don't care. I mean,
Well, don't they have all that amazing electric sort of wetsuits? They give off electric shocks.
They didn't have those. No, it was just they were. I mean, I've seen some pictures. They didn't seem to have those.
No, maybe it's a newfangled thing.
We'll go from electric wetsuits to Burberry scarves.
Yes.
£350, and the King has a hand in this.
Yes. Well, obviously with the coronation, there's endless little stories like this, but this is quite a good example of one. The King has collaborated with Burberry to do a scarf, which will cost £350. And it has plants on it to reflect...
Do we have a picture of this scarf? No? No.
...love of... I can show you here. That's helpful. It's actually quite annoyingly small. But you can see it's green. There we go. And it shows his love of plants. And I think, whereas the Queen's going to be... Dogs will always be the Queen's... The thing we think of about the Queen. Clearly, the palace wants people to think of plants and greenery. So everything he's doing has a green dimension. But there we go. Would you spend £350 on a scarf?
Well, there it is. Well, so
there it is.
What is this, like a headscarf? Is it like a woman's headscarf?
I think it's like a scarf that you would wrap
around your neck. I don't know, like a little silk, you know...
Like a pashmina type thing.
Well, no, I think it might be one of those small ones you tuck into a blouse, like an air hostess. What do I know? I'm not as fancy as that. I don't own any silk scarves.
£350 for something to tie around my neck does seem excessive.
Burberry says it's the finest silk and is a must-have for nature enthusiasts and fashion aficionados.
All right.
Yeah. What do we see now? Let's talk about Jesus. You and me and Jesus, Jesus, you and me.
Well, apparently anyone and Jesus, because he's exemplifying the single lifestyle. The Church of England are saying that, you know, there is too much judgment of people who are single. As a single woman, I absolutely agree, there's far too much judgment. But Jesus himself was single. This is one of the things that we know.
Do you mean, when you say judgment, do you think it automatically comes with the question, why is he on his own? Why is she on her own? There must be a reason.
I think so. And to be fair, the longer you are single, and I have been single for one, the more it's kind of, can you be bothered? I was saying earlier, if it weren't so morally questionable, I'd love to be a mistress.
Yes.
I'll have one night a week.
Judgment.
If there's anyone interested, Emma would love to be
I do have moral questions about it, but one night a
Jesus
week.
did have some things to say.
I mean,
Mary Magdalene was allegedly one of his dear friends.
With sex workers. One night a week, and then pat them off for all the emotional hard labours of their wife. That sounds perfect to me.
Oh my goodness, yeah. By the way, Jesus was never on his own. He always had his 12 mates with him.
I mean, there may be a more
guy.
Interesting lifestyle there that we haven't yet excavated.
And Mary Magdalene was always around, wasn't she? She was there as well. It was interesting. It's an interesting one.
I'm a Catholic because the priests are single, and so it's a given that being single's fine in Catholicism.
Yes.
I mean, yes, there's no historical problems with that at all.
Freddie, let's talk about gambling, because this plays into sport a lot, and the Times has this on the front page, and they talk about what do they talk about?
It's a government white paper. That has been long anticipated, and gambling firms have been dreading this white paper because there's a lot of activism to sort of clamp down on the gambling firms. And it seems like, as often happens with this government, they've sort of fudged it slightly, and they will be forcing tougher limits on how much people can gamble on online slot machines, and they'll be introducing affordability checks so that you don't gamble away what you can't afford. So possibly a sensible compromise. The gambling industry is significant in Britain. And
of course it is, yeah. And it's how it influences and where it's available. And, you know, it's not, I'm not making a judgment one way or the other. I'm just saying often I'd be at sporting events or with people and you're talking away to them and you turn and they are on their phones laying bets.
Yeah.
And not watching, and almost you wonder that maybe they understand it better than me or they are just addicted to what goes on.
Yeah, I think the problem is those who don't have the compulsion might like have a little flutter on the Grand National or the FA Cup final or something. Whereas people who have a problem with gambling, it is a miserable, horrible lifestyle, which has just been made so much more intensive with online gambling, apps. So every time they crack down on something like the fixed odds betting terminals, for example, it just moves. They move that, you know, basically what is the crack of the addiction elsewhere, and that there are real problems with people losing huge livelihoods, losing family members, you know, really a very big problem. And it's so hard to understand if you don't have that compulsion.
Guys, really appreciate it. Enjoyed your company today.
Emma, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. 10 to 9 is the time. We're looking at very interesting pictures coming up very shortly. Stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, we can tell you that British forces are racing to evacuate many people out of Sudan as possible before the ceasefire ends tonight.
536 people with British passports have been flown to safety on 6 separate flights so far. However, the Foreign Secretary warns he can't guarantee how many more flights will depart after the deadline of midnight tonight.
Government's legal challenge against a planned nurses' strike this weekend will be heard in the High Court today. Nurses plan to walk out for 48 hours from Sunday. It's an ongoing dispute over pay, but the Health Secretary claims the strike mandate runs out on the 2nd of May.
The Prince and Princess of Wales will visit a mountain rescue team in Merthyr Tydfil today. William and Kate will socialise with members of the Central Beacons Mountain Rescue Team before meeting community members at Dowlais Rugby Club.
We're going to show you some amazing photographs now. You're used to seeing, you're used to seeing the royal family posing for official shots and looking very well. But award-winning photographer joins us now, Alison Jackson, an artiste, and I'm just Alison. I love that hair. That's very good. My hair was like that this morning, you know.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, I don't even have to do anything. I just wake up and go.
Yes, that's good. So anyway, Alison's had the Queen trying on rubber gloves. Meghan and...
dragging Kate by the hair.
Yes, of course, yes. And there you are. It was like a scene from Dynasty there. And even Princess Diana and Marilyn Monroe out shopping together. Now, Alison's got a new exhibition.
Yeah, and it takes a look at cheekier things around the King's coronation. Little play on words there. There's a little bottom shot, which I'm sure we'll show you in a minute.
You said that just like Dame Edna. Little bottom shot.
As we said, Alison's in the studio with us. And Alison, you've been doing this now. You created this genre. You invented this idea. And it just fascinates us. I mean, we're in this era of deep fakes, but this makes us laugh. This is how we imagine the royals are behind closed doors. And you're really playing on that, aren't you?
Yes. Well, I mean, the royal family shrouded in myth, particularly when the Queen was alive, like she had such a silence around her. We're all trying to guess, you know, what are they like in private? Obviously, now Charles is king, they're more talkers, but we're getting some incredible stories, you know, like come out like with the Harry stories and, you know, all these other bits of information. So I'm really sort of creating the scenes that we've all imagined but never seen before. And these people really exist. I mean, you know, that is John Smith. You just think it's Prince Charles, so you can't rely on your own perception when it comes to...
Well, what you do, your artwork's amazing. I mean, you've got your exhibition...
Look at that, Eamonn.
I know. Your exhibition opens today at the Grove Gallery in London, and this is called The Crown, by and large. And
look at the readings there.
It is so good. The quality's so good. Tell me about your work as an artist now. What you don't just click and hope for the best here. How long does it take to get the right shot? Maybe sometimes you never get the right shot.
Well, that's right. But I always come out with something, I think. But it's a nightmare because, I've got to find the lookalikes, I have to run after people down the street, and sometimes I go up to the real celebrity thinking they're a great lookalike, so they're not best pleased.
You actually approach people in the street?
Yes, yes I do. I run after them.
Do you think I look like George Clooney?
Oh, God, Eamonn,
See, even she thinks
Dead ringer. Dead ringer.
Dead ringer.
So it's very difficult. Then I got to style the wigs. I mean, you tried doing a Donald Trump wig. I mean, it's incredible.
He has tried, actually. Funny you should say that. That's another story. But I should point out, I mean, you are a monarchist. This isn't you laughing at the royal family, but this is, I suppose, increasingly controversial. People don't like jokes as much anymore. Everybody's offended by things. Are you finding that with your work? Or are you actually finding we've got a really great British sense of humour, and ultimately this is about a sort of form of voyeurism, really?
Well, we're all voyeurs because we can never reach the people depicted in the news stories. Basically, we're always chasing after them because we live our lives through imagery, and the people, we think we know them intimately, but actually, very few of us have had a chance to. But I made quite a rude sculpture about Donald Trump, as you can imagine, in the Oval Office. And no museum would have it, and so I put it in a gallery in London, and it went viral, and it was really interesting because it was 30-year-old-ish women who went viral on Facebook were really interested in seeing this particular sculpture. So I think there is an appetite, and they were interested in it because there were it was brave and courageous to do something so out there.
I suppose in this modern world where a lot of us only put our best images out on social media, we're kind of creating these false illusions anyway, and we don't really care. We know it's not real. Do you think, I mean, you've got interesting views on this. We kind of don't care whether things are faked or real. We just kind of enjoy it all for what it is.
That's right. We really don't care what's real or what's fake anymore. It really doesn't matter. And we're becoming fake-looking as well. I mean, look at Kim Kardashian. She's like Jessica Rabbit. Donald Trump is like, a Flintstone. So that sort of unreal look in reality is also fashionable. So it's kind of really an interesting time. And what's going to happen when we live our lives through deep fakes?
I know, that is quite scary.
Well, we've been talking about this in the programme today. They can now deep fake not only your image, and there's a couple of dramas I'm watching at the moment, absolutely scary what they can do, but your voice. We were talking today, and we don't really want to go into how they can do it, but believe me, you've been on this programme today, what they can do with your voice and fool people into thinking things. But what are you doing with your exhibition? When people come along, what do you hope, what do you get the biggest thrill out? That they think, oh, this looks like the real people, or that there's some sort of statement made there, or they say, how did she do that? That was brilliant.
I think really what really fascinates me is how we can't tell what's real anymore. We just don't care. And does it matter? So for a nanosecond, you think it's real. Then you realise you cannot rely on your own perception when it comes to photography. And we live our lives through imagery. And that's, I find, interesting.
Can I just ask, I mean, Eamonn's talked about how the royals have a great sense of humour. Have you ever met any of them? Have they seen any of your work, and do you get feedback?
I try and avoid, but every now and then I do come, but of course. But I think that they're party animals, aren't they? I mean, they're great entertainers.
Listen, here's my favourite royal. Let's have a look at this picture that I gave you there. Look, just that's my favourite.
That's your
so much fun, and people think that I don't like her for some reason. But there you go, Alison. It is a pleasure. It is called the Crown Exhibition. A lot of spoof photographs there. More than that, it's beautiful artwork at London's Grove Gallery there with Alison Jackson. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you. Lovely seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do stay with us. We're going to have more for you on today's teachers' strikes after the National Education Union branded the government's pay offer insulting.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News, we're starting the conversation and having the debate that the establishment won't have.
No one will be cancelled.
Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Schools face mass disruption as tens of thousands of teachers stage fresh walkouts.
Hello there, very good morning to you. Here we go, Thursday 27th of April. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. Thank you very much for your company.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Schools in England face closures today as teachers hold mass strikes. All major education unions have rejected the government's offer of a 4.3% pay rise, with the NEU branding it insulting.
This morning, the Health Secretary will bring a legal challenge against a proposed 48-hour nurses' strike. It starts on Sunday. The leader of the Royal College of Nursing has accused Steve Barclay of treating healthcare workers like criminals.
The illegal migration bill's passed through the House of Commons despite criticism from some Conservative MPs. The bill is expected to run into more opposition when it faces the House of Lords, and it could be heavily amended.
Evacuation flights from Sudan could continue after the end of the ceasefire tonight. That's according to the army officer in charge. So far, over 500 British nationals have been rescued.
And a diplomatic storm is brewing after it was revealed that the architect of China's crackdown on Hong Kong will attend the King's coronation. Politicians have reacted with fury, calling his attendance an insult.
Thanks very much, and thanks for your comments and your calls throughout the programme this morning. They're very much appreciated, as would be your vote at the Television Radio Industry Club Awards, which will happen in June. And the programme and certain individuals connected to the programme are nominated for those awards. So please do get in touch. Go to the Trick website and register your vote. Thank you.
So to our top story this morning, tens of thousands of teachers in England will walk out today after members of the National Education Union rejected the government's pay offer, calling it insulting.
All major teaching unions have now rejected the 4.3% wage rise, warning the disruption will get worse unless a deal is reached.
It follows the closure of most schools in Northern Ireland yesterday, but in Scotland, teachers have suspended strike action with the union, urging its members to accept the government's offer of a 12% pay increase over 2 years.
All of these things are sort of not really comparable because they're separated over various years and whatever. No one really seems to speak plain English on this. I mean, one of the...
Deliberately, I think.
Yeah, one of the English offers was a cash payment of £1,000, and it all gets very, very complicated. So it's very difficult to say. We can't say that the Scottish offer was better than the English offer, or where the Welsh come in, or where the Northern Irish come in on this one. But earlier we spoke to a former advisor to the government on all of this, Mark Lehan, who told us strikes aren't the best way to solve pay disputes, in his opinion.
What the National Education Union and other unions will tell you is that since 2010, the real value of the pay that teachers get has been eroded by inflation. Although there have been pay rises since then, the pay rises haven't kept pace with the cost of living increases since then. And they've got a point. However, what people like myself and probably you, Isabel, listening to what you said this morning, would argue is that even though pay has come down for teachers, the strikes are not necessarily the best way to resolve that issue. As you said, these are the first strikes we've had since all of the teaching unions, there's 4 main ones, since all 4 unions rejected the government's offer, which actually was pretty generous. It was it offered all teachers currently in the job £1,000 bonus for this year and up to 4.5% increase for next year. But that was rejected. That offer has been taken off the table now, and we won't know what they're recommending, or even the government won't know what the recommendations from that independent pay body will be for about another month. So the question as to what we do between now and then.
Let's go to our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, on all of this. When I was saying, Tom, these deals are all quite complex. What do we know? What is being offered in England?
Yeah, they are incredibly complex and very difficult to compare. But at least in England, what has happened is the government, of course, paid 5% back in 2022. That was a 5% raise. They're now saying they will backdate a £1,000 one-off payment for this year, and on top of that, a 4.3% pay increase next year. But that's not the same for all teachers. It gets even more complicated because for those who are newly qualified starting teachers, those on the lowest income bands, they'll get a 7.1% increase next year. Although, of course, this deal has been rejected by those 4 unions. As a result, the government is now saying that £1,000 cash payment is off the table because that's a backdated thing. And the pay review process that now takes place for next year outside of the bilateral negotiations is just about next year. They can't statutorily look back and give a back payment. So the government's argument is leave this just to the pay review bodies and you won't get the £1,000 for this year.
A factor in all this, obviously, you know, we have to talk about the politics, we have to talk about the rights of the teachers and what their grievance is, but we also have to talk about the parents who are impacted by this, and most importantly, I think, the children. This is the 4th day of strike this year. There's another one on Tuesday next week. We know that it's exam season. We saw from lockdown the impact on education outcomes of that. And also the Children's Commissioner, Rachel D'Souza, saying that actually when we've got a problem of people going missing from the school system, this actually makes it worse.
Certainly, and we've heard so many stories about this sort of lack of catch-up ability and the number of children, of course, who've missed out on so many days over the last 2 years. There's almost a generation coming up through now who have been so severely impacted by the disruption and now further disruption all in the wake of COVID. It's a very worrying thing because in international league tables, particularly English standards have been rising for the last decade. English reading and writing ability and maths to a slightly lesser extent have been rising up these international league tables, these international comparison tables. Standards have been rising and people have been getting generally what is considered around the world to be a better education. The worry now in government is that this progress might well be slipping back. People this year getting a potentially worse education than people 3 years ago did. And that's a massive concern.
Yeah, of course it is.
Well, we're talking about education. Let's talk about health now. Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, he thinks he can derail the next nurses' strike.
Well, yes, the government feels like it's presented a positive offer that, of course, has been accepted by some unions. But ultimately, this is a game of brinkmanship, and it's wrong to talk about it as a game. But to some extent, that's what this back and forth is. And ultimately, the question is who is going to win over the public affections. At the moment, that does seem to be more in the nurses' court.
I mean, I think it was Pat Cullen, the boss of the RCN union, saying that he was criminalising nurses. But that seems, kind of not such a bad criticism when you see what the civil servants are calling him.
Well, yes, I mean, certainly he's come under now, he's the next minister to come under fire over alleged bullying claims. And of course, this follows what happened to Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, forced out of his job due to 2 complaints that were upheld by the independent investigator. We've also heard now complaints about Alok Sharma, who was the COP26 minister in government, and now Steve Barclay is thrown into the mix. It does seem that there is
Williamson, previous Education Secretary.
It does seem that there's a march now of people perhaps submitting complaints about stuff that happened quite a long time ago, and one of the concerns.
Either it's a terrible culture or it's too easy to complain. It's too easy to point the finger. It's one or the other, isn't it?
Well, one of the concerns of Dominic Raab, of course, last week was that a lot of the complaints were historic, were submitted on one day, appeared to be coordinated, and in the private sector, in normal arbitration, you would have a sort of statute of limitations. You wouldn't be able to bring something that's older than a few months. That doesn't seem to be the case in government, and that's raising some concerns.
OK, thanks very much indeed, Tom. Good talking to you. Thanks for that roundup. Appreciate it. With the time at 9:10, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Well, talking of strikes, more than 400 workers from His Majesty's Revenue and Customs are to take industrial action in May and June. PCS members will strike for a whopping 18 days over the 2 months amid a dispute over pay, pensions, jobs and redundancy. The union says the government has until later today to make a fair offer to stop the strikes.
Lost earnings due to long-term sickness is costing the economy billions of pounds. That's according to the Institute for Public Policy Research. It estimates lost earnings cost around 43 billion, the equivalent of 2% of GDP. It's calling for a new Health and Prosperity Act to tackle the issue.
A waxwork of the Queen Consort's been unveiled at Madame Tussauds in London ahead of the coronation. The figure is styled, as you can see, in navy blue and stands next to King Charles and William and Kate there in the throne room.
Pierce, I think that's particularly good. A lot of these statues can go horrendously wrong, but
very
Camilla's
flattering.
one.
Very
Yes.
flattering. She's looking very young.
Yes,
Very
well, I
nice.
think it's hard to tell which one's real.
I think when you saw her, if you saw her
Up
face close, you'd know that's the waxwork. I speak as a great fan of Camilla.
Yeah.
I've met her a few times. She's great fun.
She is great fun. She is great fun. So will your show be fun today?
It will, although we're talking about the coronation. Extraordinary decision, in my view, to invite this appalling man from China who was responsible for the crackdown on democratic rights.
Are you more annoyed at him than Michelle O'Neill?
I am. Well, look, Michelle O'Neill will at some point be First Minister in Northern Ireland, so that's why she's being invited. She's Sinn Féin. Her family has links.
But it's more amazing that she said yes.
I'm amazed she's going, bearing in mind She does not recognise Britain. She does not recognise the monarchy.
She is a Republican. Her family is connected to the IRA.
And she's saying she's going because she recognises a lot of people on the island of Ireland think the coronation is an important event. I'm astonished she's going.
I think it's a sign of progress, as you say, the kind of growing respect and trust on both sides.
And don't forget, the Queen met Martin McGuinness. Jay Adams and Charles has met this woman too. So, but I think the Chinese thing is going to cause a big problem because there is no doubt he was the architect of
this is Han Xing.
Exactly.
Especially when you look at some of the people who haven't been invited.
Like the Queen's
bridesmaid,
Pamela Hicks, who was at the coronation of the Queen's coronation.
Have they said why she's not invited?
And her father, of course, is Lord Mountbatten, who was murdered by the IRA.
Correct, yeah.
And a great friend of an advisor to the King.
I think it's a numbers thing.
Is Lady Hussey going?
I don't think she is, although she's back in the royal fold. It is about numbers, and I think also
exuberance and extravagance and all that sort of thing.
And they probably think poor old Pamela Hicks, 94. She's seen a few. I think it's very sad and disappointed she wasn't invited. She could at least said no.
Yes, exactly.
One person.
I know.
Okay. Andrew, who are you with today? Is it Beverly?
Beverly, yeah.
Beverly, 9:30, to the point.
Right, still to come on our little programme ahead of the coronation's big lunch next week, the Great British Bake Off finalist Alice Feveronia will bring us some recipes to impress your friends and neighbours. She's with us next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, right across the whole country, we were talking about this today and we wanted to reflect it, to hear, to see what you're planning for the preparations for the King's coronation.
And to celebrate the historic event, the London Eye has transformed one of its pods using true-to-life royal replicas.
Get out of it.
Yeah.
Right, let's see more now from Lisa Hartle.
On the day of King Charles III's coronation, 2,000 people will be watching the historical moment in Westminster Abbey. But for those who don't have an invitation, the London Eye has created a coronation capsule, replicating the Abbey complete with a throne and crown 135 metres in the air.
This capsule is decorated like Westminster Abbey. We have the pews, we have the decoration, the ceiling, and also we have the coronation chair, a replica of the wooden chair from 1296, and the crown jewels, the orb, the sceptre and St Edward's crown. That's the crown that we'll see being put by the Archbishop of Canterbury on Charles's head. It's solid gold, it's got 444 precious and semi-precious stones, and it's so heavy it weighs the same as 2 litres of water. And you know, the Queen, she said it could snap your neck. Well, this one's a replica, so it won't snap your neck.
The majestic pod creates the illusion of ribbed vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows, carved stone columns, and when you reach the top, a bird's eye view of Westminster Abbey, where 38 coronations have taken place since 1066. The replica of the 700-year-old coronation chair is complete with years of schoolboy and tourist graffiti.
The coronation chair dates back to 1296. It was made when King Edward II, he stole the stone of Scone. He took it from Scotland. It was the iconic stone on which Scottish monarchs were crowned. He took it, he brought it back to London, and they used it to crown the English monarchs, and they made this chair to house the stone of Scone, that big stone you can see there. Also, what I love about the chair is it's got all this graffiti on it, so that people graffitied it, and some of the Westminster schoolboys wrote graffiti on it, and one of them wrote, P. Abbott slept here. So it is the exact replica, even down to the fact that some historic people in the 18th century graffitied on the coronation chair.
Those riding in the capsule will be invited to sit in the throne and take their stately selfie to commemorate the historical event.
We have had a huge amount of interest throughout from UK as well as across the globe. We are really excited. We'll be expecting a lot of people from across the world. I think it's a great opportunity for us, people to come in to visit London as well as the London Eye, to be part of such an amazing celebration.
Tickets for the coronation capsule cost £60 and it runs from Saturday until Monday the 8th of May. Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
Yeah. Stop it. He was just telling me his London Eye story, which made me giggle.
Well, here's what happened. I'll be just quite quick about this, right? So when I was dating my now wife, I booked a pod at the London Eye, and we got it, and you had dinner and champagne. So you could have the whole pod to you and your partner, and you'd have dinner and champagne.
Romantic,
and whatever
lovely,
it is.
intimate,
Very romantic,
cozy.
whatever it is. But anyway, 2 security guards arrived instead in the pod, and I said, "Excuse me, is this not private, or what's this about?" And they said, "Well, it's in case you get over amorous, Mr. Holmes, because people in the past have got a bit jiggity-jig in here."
And this is why I come back from advert breaks giggling. You cut me up and you wonder what's going on.
But it's a true story.
Telling me these stories.
It's a true story.
I don't know what to
well,
say.
as well as the coronation, friends and neighbours are being encouraged to get together for a big lunch. Is this on the Sunday?
Yes.
So, right,
yeah.
so this is the day after.
Yes. Well, let's get some tips and ideas then from the former Great British Bake Off finalist Alice Fevronia, who will give us some fun recipes that we can all try out on the big day. Hello.
Alice,
welcome.
what would you be trying out, Alice? So you going to try anything out?
Yeah, so I'm definitely excited to try out the coronation quiche because I haven't had a go at that yet. But of course, I'll be turning up to events with a big sort of showstopper cake and lots of delicious cakes and bakes. But it's not necessarily about that. If food is not your thing, obviously it's my passion. It's what I love doing, and it can be a great conversation starter when you're meeting new people. But if food isn't your thing, pop to the shops, buy a packet of biscuits. The most important thing about the Coronation Big Lunch is that you're connecting to people in your community, your neighbours, you're speaking to people that you haven't necessarily spoken to before. So.
Breaking bread together, as they say.
Breaking bread, yeah. Alice, I just wanted to say it takes 35 minutes to, preparation takes 35 minutes, cooking takes 45 minutes.
And then it has to chill for an hour.
Oh, see, this is why I don't do these things. But I just wanted to say, Alice, the Coronation quiche, I looked up the Good Food Guide, the BBC Good Food Guide, and they give the ingredients, they give the recipe, they give 4 steps, how to get it all together. So there's no excuse for anyone who fancies a bit of that royal quiche.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to give something a go if you haven't tried that before. It's all about getting out there into your community, and it could be, as I said, a great conversation starter. Have you tried this new delicious quiche? That's
compared to a coronation chicken, you can go wrong with a coronation quiche, can't you? Much more. I think it's much more difficult a quiche to make. I mean, you can have a soggy bottom. What were your top tips to avoid a soggy bottom for the coronation?
Yeah, I mean, it is always a risk. I suppose if pastry isn't your thing, you can always go and buy shop bought. I really don't think anyone should not give it a go because they're worried about the baking element. There's always sort of ways around that. But, you can blind bake the pastry before you put the fillings in to make sure that you don't get a soggy bottom.
Oh, right, so it's nice and hard before you put it all in.
What would you, when it comes to, say you have 6 or more people around your table for this celebratory lunch, what can you not go wrong with? What would you be keen to espouse on this?
So I think, it depends, what people are keen to eat. I suppose whatever your tastes are, it really doesn't matter. I think it doesn't have to be elaborate and expensive. If baking's not your thing, there are loads of things you can make that don't even involve putting your oven on. I suppose it's just creating a friendly and welcoming atmosphere. That really is the most important thing. And if food is the sort of element that brings people together, then that's great.
What will you be making?
Well, definitely the quiche. Cake is my thing, really. So I'll definitely be making a cake. And I made recently a salted caramel and chocolate tart that was so good, I'm going to make that again.
Yeah. What sort of cake?
Probably a Victoria sponge. It's
traditional.
Hard to beat.
Yeah, can't go wrong.
That wasn't invented for Queen Victoria's coronation, was it, by any chance?
I'm not too sure. I think maybe it was just one of her favourites. I'll have to check up on that one.
It's one of my favourites.
It's one of mine.
And I was invited to Bake Off to be in a version of Bake Off.
I thought you were going to say to Queen Victoria's coronation.
Oh, were you indeed? Ha, 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 ha. But Alice, my wife said to me, you can't say yes to that. You can't do that. I said, why? She said, because it's a science and you're stupid and you can't do this, and it's just not like cooking. It's not like you throw everything in a pot. And the whole thing is, has she got a point about that when it comes to baking?
Yes and no. Baking is a science, and there are some technical elements to it. But I think if you can follow a recipe, give it a go. Sometimes it doesn't always come out the way you want it, or it doesn't always look as beautiful as perhaps you want it to, but it will probably still taste delicious. I always say you learn something new from every time you bake. So
it's got to look delicious.
It's got to look
delicious.
Alice Favronia, thank you very much indeed with the coronation.
Happy coronation.
Preparations and recipes there. Thank you very much indeed. I like butterfly buns.
Oh, they're lovely.
They are nice.
Do you know, apparently we were just hearing the Victoria sponge was called that, not because it was her favourite, but because baking powder was invented in the Victorian era.
No. But I do love, honestly, if you want to make me really happy, Victoria sponge with plenty of jam.
Oh, yes,
cream in it.
yeah.
Really, really nice.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it'll be really nice.
That is it from us for today. We'll be at Buckingham Palace next week. I'm really looking forward to it. We'll be broadcasting live from there.
Yes,
Stephen and Ellie will be here live from 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
OK, up next, Andrew and Bev, to the point. Have yourselves a good day.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to